The world shattered in an instant. The ground beneath Ryu Min's feet dissolving into nothingness as a deafening roar swallowed his scream, his vision blurring into streaks of light and shadow, as if reality itself had been torn apart. His body weightless yet crushed by an invisible force, his lungs burning with every gasp as the air thickened into something unbreathable. His fingers clawing at nothing as he tumbled through the void, the sensation of falling endless and terrifying, until suddenly impact. His spine cracking against cold stone, his skull ringing like a struck bell. His vision swimming with spots of darkness as he groaned, rolling onto his side, his muscles screaming in protest. His breath coming in ragged, uneven bursts, the taste of copper sharp on his tongue. His ears still ringing from the deafening silence that had replaced the chaos of his arrival, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim, flickering light of an enormous cavernous arena, its walls towering high above him, etched with strange, glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat, the air thick with the stench of sweat and iron. The distant echoes of panicked shouts and sobs bouncing off the stone, the ground beneath him vibrating with something primal, something alive, his instincts screaming at him to run, to hide, to fight. But his body refused to obey, still reeling from the shock of his sudden displacement, his thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and dread. Until a voice, cold and mechanical, sliced through the chaos, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. Welcome, participants. To the trial of the gods, the words dripping with mockery, the tone devoid of empathy. You have been chosen to entertain the divine, to prove your worth in a game of survival, where only the strongest, the cleverest, the most ruthless will ascend, the voice continued. The words settling like a lead weight in Ryu Min's chest, stomach twisting into knots, his hands trembling as he pushed himself upright. His eyes darting across the sea of faces around him. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, all as bewildered as he was. Their expressions a mosaic of terror, anger, and desperate hope. Some already clutching weapons he hadn't noticed before, crude knives and rusted swords materializing in their grips, while others, like him, stood empty-handed, vulnerable. The disparity between them glaring. The unfairness of it all igniting a spark of fury in his gut. But before he could process it further, the voice spoke again. Your first trial begins now. And with those words the ground trembled, the runes on the walls flaring a violent crimson, the air splitting open with a sound like tearing flesh. And from the rift emerged a creature, a monstrosity of sinew and teeth, its body a grotesque fusion of wolf and serpent, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence, its maw dripping with saliva that sizzled against the stone, its roar shaking the very foundations of the arena. The sound so visceral, it sent a wave of nausea through Ryu Min, his legs buckling under the sheer force of it. His heartbeat pounding in his ears like a war drum, the creature's gaze sweeping across the crowd, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Hunting for the weakest, the slowest, the most afraid, and then it moved, a blur of claws and fangs. The first row of players torn apart before they could scream, limbs flying, blood painting the ground in macabre strokes. The chaos erupting like a storm, people scrambling in every direction, trampling over each other in their desperation to escape. Their cries a symphony of agony and terror, Ryu Min frozen for a heartbeat too long, his body refusing to obey. His mind screaming at him to run, but it was too late. The creature's shadow falling over him, its breath hot and rancid against his skin, its jaws opening wide, the rows of jagged teeth gleaming with saliva and blood, and then pain white-hot and all-consuming, his vision exploding into stars as those teeth clamped down on his torso, his ribs snapping like twigs, his organs crushed, his scream cut short as the creature shook him like a rag doll. His body tearing apart, the last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the creature's eye, gleaming with amusement, as if this was all just a game, and then nothing, an abyss of silence, of emptiness, until suddenly, light, his lungs expanding with a gasp. His body whole again, his skin unbroken, his clothes untouched. The arena around him exactly as it had been before the creature's arrival, the other players still standing in stunned silence, the voice echoing once more. Do you understand now? This is the game, and Ryu Min looked down at his hands, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened, the memory of his death vivid, visceral. Impossible to dismiss as a hallucination, the pain still echoing in his nerves. The terror still coiled in his gut, and then he noticed it. A flickering number in the corner of his vision, 99/100ths. The realization hitting him like a physical blow, he had died, and he had come back. He had 100 lives to spend, 100 chances to survive this nightmare, and as the creature roared again, as the bloodshed began anew, Ryu Min did the only thing he could. He ran. His legs pumping, his heart racing, his mind already calculating, planning, adapting, because if this was a game, then he would play it. He would learn its rules, he would exploit its weaknesses, and he would survive, no matter how many times he had to die to make it happen. The second death came faster than the first, the creature's claws ripping through Ryu Min's throat, before he could even process the pain. His vision exploding into crimson as he choked on his own blood, his body collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut. The world fading into blackness only to snap back into focus moments later, his lungs heaving as he stumbled forward. The number in his vision ticking down to 98/100ths. The realization that this was real, that he was truly trapped in this nightmare, settling over him like a suffocating blanket. His hands trembling as he wiped phantom blood from his neck, his eyes darting across the battlefield where players were being slaughtered like cattle. Their screams blending into a cacophony of terror, the creature moving with terrifying precision, its massive form weaving through the crowd like a reaper harvesting souls, its claws slick with gore, its maw stained red, its eyes gleaming with something almost intelligent. As if it knew exactly how to maximize the fear, how to draw out the suffering, and Ryu Min knew he had to move, had to think, had to find a way to survive beyond just running blindly, his mind racing as he ducked behind a crumbling pillar, his back pressed against the cold stone. His breath coming in short, ragged gasps, his body still trembling from the visceral memory of dying twice in what felt like minutes. The pain lingering in his nerves like a ghost, his fingers digging into his palms as he forced himself to focus, to analyze, because if he had 100 lives, then each death was a lesson, each failure a chance to learn, and he would be damned if he wasted them. His eyes scanning the chaos for anything useful, any weapon, any advantage, any weakness in the creature's movements. When he spotted it, a glint of metal half buried in the blood-soaked ground, a dagger, its blade short but sharp, its hilt, wrapped in frayed leather, and without hesitation. He lunged for it, his fingers closing around the hilt, just as the creature's shadow fell over him, its breath hot against his back, its growl vibrating through his bones. And he rolled to the side just as its claws came down where his head had been, the stone shattering under the force of the blow. Debris flying through the air as Ryu Min scrambled to his feet, the dagger clutched tightly in his hand, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure the creature could hear it. His muscles coiled tight with adrenaline, his mind screaming at him to run. But something stopped him. Something primal. Something furious. The realization that he didn't have to just survive. He could fight back. He could make this thing bleed. And with a roar that tore from his throat, raw and desperate, he charged. The dagger aimed for the creature's eye, his body moving on pure instinct, his vision narrowing to that single target. The world slowing around him as the creature turned, its massive head swinging toward him, its jaws opening wide, its teeth gleaming like knives, and then impact. The dagger sinking deep into the creature's eye with a sickening squelch. Black ichor sprang across Ryu Min's face. The creature's shriek piercing his eardrums, its body thrashing wildly, its claws slashing through the air blindly, one catching Ryu Min across the chest, sending him flying backward. His ribs cracking on impact with the ground, his vision swimming with black spots, his breath coming in wet, painful gasps as blood filled his lungs, his body screaming in agony. But he didn't care, because the creature was stumbling, its movements erratic, its remaining eye rolling wildly in its socket, its shrieks turning into gurgles as it collapsed to its knees, its massive body trembling before it finally stilled. The arena falling silent for one breathless moment before the voice echoed again. First trial cleared, the words dripping with amusement. Congratulations to those who survived, and Ryu Min let out a hysterical laugh, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. His vision blurring as the adrenaline faded, the dagger still clutched in his hand, the creature's blood drying on his skin. The number in his vision now reading 97/100ths, 2 lives lost in mere minutes, but he had done it. He had killed the monster, he had survived, and as the surviving players began to stir, their faces pale with shock, their eyes wide with disbelief, Ryu Min knew this was only the beginning, the first floor of what was undoubtedly a much larger, much crueler game, and he would need every one of his remaining lives to make it through. His grip tightening on the dagger as he pushed himself to his feet, his body aching, his mind already calculating, already planning, because if the gods wanted entertainment, then he would give them a show they'd never forget. The silence after the creature's death was more terrifying than its screams. The survivors standing frozen in the blood-stained arena like statues carved from fear, their wide eyes darting between each other and the corpse of the monster that had slaughtered dozens. The air thick with the metallic stench of spilled blood and the acrid temps of sweat. The ground slick with viscera that squelched underfoot with every hesitant step. The voice of the system still echoing in their skulls like a bad dream that refused to fade. Its mocking congratulations hanging over them like a guillotine blade, waiting to drop when suddenly the walls of the arena began to shift. The ancient stones grinding against each other with a sound that set teeth on edge, the glowing runes pulsing faster, brighter, their crimson light painting the survivors in hellish hues as a staircase materialized from the far wall, its steps carved from black obsidian that seemed to drink in the light, its ascent disappearing into shadow far above, and without warning, the voice returned. "Proceed to the second floor," it commanded, the words laced with something hungry. Something eager, or be left behind to rot, and like rats fleeing a sinking ship, the survivors scrambled forward. Their earlier camaraderie forgotten in the face of this new threat, elbows flying as they jostled for position. The weaker ones being shoved aside without a second glance. Their pleas for help ignored as the crowd surged toward the staircase. Ryu Min hanging back near the rear, his dagger still clutched in white-knuckled fingers, his eyes scanning the chaos for threats, both obvious and hidden. Because he'd already learned that in this game the greatest dangers often wore human faces as gaze. Catching on a tall figure near the front of the pack, a man moving with lethal grace, his bare arms corded with muscle beneath intricate tattoos that seemed to shift in the dim light a massive curved blade, resting easily across his shoulders as he carved through the crowd without effort. The other players giving him a wide berth, as if sensing the violence that clung to him like a second skin. And Ryu Min knew instinctively that this was Kang Jae-Ho, the man who had survived the first trial without a scratch, the man who had watched others die with cold indifference in his eyes, the man who might be the most dangerous player in this entire godforsaken game. A theory that proved correct moments later when a desperate survivor made the mistake of grabbing Jae-Ho's arm and panicked their fingers, barely brushing his skin before the curved blade flashed the movement too fast to follow, the would-be assailant collapsing in 2 neatly severed pieces, their blood fountaining across the stone as Jae-Ho stepped over the twitching corpse without breaking stride. His expression never changing, the message clear. Touch him and die. A lesson Ryu Min committed to memory as he finally reached the staircase, his foot touching the first obsidian step when a hand closed around his ankle, the grip weak but desperate. His gaze snapping down to meet the tear-filled eyes of a young woman, her lower half crushed beneath a chunk of fallen rubble, her lips moving soundlessly as blood bubbled from between them, her fingers trembling against his skin, her nails leaving half-moon indentations in his flesh. And for a heartbeat, Ryu Min hesitated, the human part of him screaming to help, to at least try, but the survivor in him knew the truth. She was already dead. Saving her would cost time he couldn't afford. It might cost a life he couldn't spare, and with a wrench of his leg he pulled free, her broken whimper following him up the stairs like a ghost. The sound mixing with the scrape of his boots on stone and the distant screams from below as the voice announced, "The first floor will self-destruct in 10 seconds. The words sending a fresh wave of panic through the stragglers, their frantic scrambling turning into outright madness as the walls began to shake. Great cracks spiderwebbing across the ancient stone, dust and debris raining from the ceiling as Ryu Min forced himself to move faster, his thighs burning with the effort, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the staircase trembled beneath him, the steps behind him crumbling into nothingness as the destruction spread upward. the air filling with the groans of dying. Architecture. And the terrified shrieks of those too slow to escape, when suddenly a hand grabbed his collar from behind, yanking him backward with brutal force, his spine slamming against the steps hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. His vision blurring as a heavy boot pressed down on his chest. The grinning face of a stranger looming above him. The man's teeth filed 2 points, his eyes wild with something beyond reason. "Sorry, friend." The man chuckled, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But you're my ticket out of here." And before Ryu Min could react, the man kicked him squarely in the ribs, sending him tumbling back down the collapsing staircase. His body bouncing off the jagged edges of broken steps, bones snapping with sickening cracks, skull striking stone with enough force to make his vision go white. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the grinning man leaping over his broken body, his laughter echoing in Ryu Min's ears as the world exploded around them. The number in his vision ticking down to 96/100ths as death claimed him once more, only for him to awaken with a gasp. Back at the base of the staircase, the scene reset, as if nothing had happened, the other survivors still scrambling upward. The self-destruct countdown just beginning, the grinning man nowhere in sight. And with a snarl of fury, Ryu Min launched himself up the steps, his body remembering the pain that never was, his mind already working through the angles. Because if this was how the game would be played, then he would play it better, harder, crueler than anyone else. His fingers tightening around the daggerous hilt as he vowed that the next time he saw that smiling bastard, he wouldn't hesitate to carve that grin right off his face. The second floor greeted them with a silence so absolute, it felt like a physical weight pressing against Ryu Min's eardrums, the obsidian staircase dissolving into mist the moment his foot left the final step. The survivors spilling out onto a vast platform suspended in endless void. The ground beneath their feet made of polished black marble, veined with glowing crimson streaks that pulsed like arteries. The walls non-existent. The ceiling, a swirling vortex of dark clouds shot through with lightning that illuminated the space in erratic bursts, casting monstrous shadows that twisted and lunged at the corners of vision before vanishing just as quickly. The air thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic, something old. The kind of smell that clung to forgotten battlefields and long-dead kings, the voice of the system slithering into their minds like oil on water. "Welcome to the Hall of Choices," it purred, the words dripping with malicious amusement, "where your fate rests not in strength alone, but in the wisdom of your decisions." And as the last syllable faded, 3 massive archways materialized before them, each framed by towering statues of grotesque figures frozen in expressions of agony, their stone fingers clutching at their own faces as if trying to tear the flesh from their bones. The left archway shimmering with golden light, the center radiating an eerie blue glow, the right wreathed in flickering shadows that seemed to reach hungrily toward the gathered players. None of the paths offering any hint of what lay beyond, only the unshakable sense that choosing wrong would mean death. Perhaps worse, the survivors clustering together in uncertain huddles, their whispers frantic as they debated options, some pointing to the golden path as obviously the correct choice, others arguing the blue represented water and therefore survival, a few backing away from the shadowed arch with superstitious fear, their hands making warding signs against evil, while Ryu Min hung back, his dagger still gripped tight, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Because nothing in this game was as it seemed, the golden path too obvious, the blue too tranquil, the shadows too theatrical, the entire setup reeking of misdirection. His gaze flicking to Kang Jae-Ho, who stood apart from the crowd, his massive blade resting across his shoulders, his expression unreadable as he studied the arches with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up prey. When suddenly, a wiry man with wild eyes and a mouthful of broken teeth darted forward, his arms waving wildly. "I know which one to pick," he shrieked, spittle flying from his lips. "The gold one. It's got to be the gold one. The gods love gold." And before anyone could stop him, he sprinted through the golden archway, his body silhouetted for one brilliant moment before vanishing. The survivors holding their collective breath, waiting, hoping, when an ear-splitting scream tore through the air. The sound so full of agony it made skin crawl, followed by a wet, crunching noise, and then silence. The golden light flickering once before turning a sickly green, the message clear: wrong choice. Fatal consequences. The remaining players recoiling as one, their faces pale with terror, their earlier confidence shattered. The crowd fracturing into panicked clusters, some backing away from all the arches entirely, others gripping weapons tighter as if expecting an attack at any moment. When the system voice chuckled darkly, "Time grows short," it murmured, "Choose wisely. Or don't choose at all." And with those words, the platform beneath them began to tremble. Hairline cracks spreading through the marble. The glowing veins dimming as if the floor itself was dying. Is the implication obvious? Stay too long and fall into the void below. Ryu Min's mind racing through possibilities, analyzing every angle, when a soft voice spoke at his elbow. "It's not about the arches," the words barely audible. And he turned to see a slight figure wrapped in a tattered cloak, their face hidden in shadow, except for a pair of piercing green eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Look at the statues," they whispered, and Ryu Min's gaze snapped to the grotesque figures framing each archway. Really looked this time, noticing what he'd missed before. The statue on the golden arch clutched its face in despair. The blue arch's statue had its mouth open in a silent scream, but the shadowed arch's figure, its hands weren't tearing at its face but covering its eyes, as if refusing to watch something terrible. And in that moment, Ryu Min understood, the realization hitting him like a lightning strike. The true path wasn't through any arch, it was behind the statues themselves. The entire set up a test of perception rather than choice, and without hesitation he lunged forward, ignoring the shouts of alarm from the others as he sprinted not toward any arch but directly at the shadowed arch's statue, his body slamming against the cold stone, his fingers scrambling for purchase on the grotesque figure's limbs, now hauling himself up its twisted form with desperate strength, the marble cracking beneath his grip, the statue's eyes seeming to follow him as he climbed. When suddenly, the platform gave one final shudder and began to break apart. Huge chunks of black stone tumbling into the void below, players screaming as they lost their footing, their arms windmilling as they fell into darkness. Kang Jae-Ho, moving with terrifying speed as he leaped from one falling fragment to another, his blade flashing as he carved handholds into the crumbling architecture. His face, a mask of cold focus, even as the world disintegrated around him. While Ryu Min reached the statue's shoulders and saw what he had hoped for, a narrow ledge leading behind the statue. A hidden path veiled in shadows, and without looking back he jumped, his body slamming onto the ledge with bruising force, his fingers scrambling at the smooth stone as he nearly slid off into oblivion, his muscles screaming as he pulled himself forward into the darkness. The sounds of the collapsing platform and dying players fading behind him as he crawled through a tight tunnel that smelled of damp earth and old blood, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his heart pounding loud enough to drown out thought. When suddenly the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, the walls lined with countless skeletons, frozen in poses of agony, their bony fingers clawing at their own eye sockets, their jaws hanging open in silent screams. The floor, a mosaic of broken weapons and shattered shields that crunched underfoot. The air so thick with the stench of decay, it made his eyes water. And at the chamber's center stood a single pedestal holding an ornate hourglass. Sands nearly run out, the voice of the system whispering through the bones. "Clever boy," it murmured, the words slithering through the chamber like snakes. But cleverness alone won't save you now, and as the last grain of sand fell, the skeletons began to twitch, their bones scraping against stone as they pulled themselves upright. Their empty eye sockets fixed on Ryu Min, their fingers flexing with dreadful anticipation, chamber echoing with the sound of 100 bony feet taking their first step forward, the hourglass flipping itself over to begin a new countdown. The numbers in Ryu Min's vision reading 95/100ths as he raised his dagger and prepared to die again. The skeletons moved with unnatural precision, their bony fingers clicking like scorpion tails as they advanced in perfect unison, their empty eye sockets fixed on Ryu Min with terrifying focus. The chamber echoing with the sound of grinding bones and the whisper of dry tendons stretching after centuries of disuse. The stench of old death thickening the air until each breath tasted like rotting meat. The hourglass sands trickling down with cruel indifference as Ryu Min backpedaled, his boots crunching on shattered armor fragments, his dagger held before him in a white-knuckled grip, his mind racing through options that grew more hopeless by the second. Because fighting meant being overwhelmed, running meant being cornered, and dying meant wasting another precious life. When suddenly his heel caught on an uneven stone, and he went down hard, his elbow cracking against the mosaic floor. Pain shooting up his arm as the skeletal horde surged forward, their bony fingers reaching like 1,000 grasping twigs. Their jaws clacking in hungry anticipation, when a thunderous crash shook the chamber. The wall of skeletons to Ryu Min left exploding into flying bone fragments as a massive blade carved through them like wheat. The curved edge gleaming with eerie light as it bisected a dozen skeletons in a single swing. The remaining undead turning as one toward the new threat. Their hollow gazes locking onto Kang Jae-Ho, who stood framed in the crumbling archway, his chest heaving, his clothes torn and bloody. His expression colder than the grave as he surveyed the skeletal army. His weapon already moving again before the bone dust had settled, carving through the undead with brutal efficiency. Each swing sending shattered ribs and skulls flying through the air like grotesque confetti. His movements so precise they bordered on art, his boots crushing the fallen bones beneath him as he advanced into the chamber. His dark eyes flicking to Ryu Min for just an instant, something unreadable passing between them before he turned back to the slaughter. The skeletons now dividing their attention between the two living targets, their numbers still overwhelming, but their formation broken. And Ryu Min didn't waste the opportunity, rolling to his feet and driving his dagger into the spine of the nearest skeleton. The blade lodging between vertebrae as the creature twisted with shocking speed, its bony fingers raking across his cheek, drawing blood that dripped onto the mosaic below. The drops sizzling where they landed, the hourglass sands suddenly reversing their flow. The voice of the system laughing in the back of his skull. Blood wakes the hungry, it crooned. How generous of you. And with a sickening crunch, the skeletons Ryu Min and Kang had destroyed began reassembling. Their bones snapping back together with wet popping sounds, the fallen warriors rising stronger than before, their eye sockets now glowing with faint red light, their movements quicker, more deliberate. The chamber shaking as more skeletons pulled themselves from the walls, their numbers doubling, then tripling, the air vibrating with the sound of clattering bones. When Kang suddenly barked a single word, pedestal, his voice rough with exertion, his blade never stopping its deadly arc. And Ryu Min understood instantly, ducking beneath a skeletal claw as he lunged for the hourglass. His fingers inches from the ornate base when a bone spear shot past his face, embedding itself in the pedestal with enough force to make the hourglass tremble, the skeletal archers lining the chamber's upper ledges already knocking their next shots. Their arrowheads glistening with something dark and viscous, Ryu Min throwing himself sideways as a volley of bone arrows hissed through the space he just occupied. Several grazing his arms and legs, the wounds immediately burning as if filled with acid. His vision swimming as poison coursed through his veins. His muscles locking up as he crashed to the floor, his body twitching uncontrollably. The skeletons closing in around him, their bony fingers reaching, when Kang was suddenly there. His blade a whirlwind of destruction as he carved a path through the undead. His free hand grabbing Ryu Min's collar and dragging him toward the pedestal. The larger man's breath coming in ragged gasps now, his movements slightly slower, the endless fighting clearly taking its toll. When they reached the hourglass, Kang didn't hesitate. Driving his fist into the delicate glass, container shattering with a sound like breaking ice. The sands inside exploding outward in a blinding golden cloud, the skeletons freezing mid-motion as the sands touched them. Their bones bleaching white, then crumbling to dust, the chamber shaking violently as the entire structure began to collapse. The voice of the system screaming in their minds, cheaters, thieves. The words laced with genuine fury, the walls cracking apart as Ryu Min and Kang sprinted for the only remaining exit. A narrow crack in the far wall that glowed with faint blue light, the floor disintegrating behind them as they ran. Chunks of stone and bone tumbling into the growing abyss below, Kang shoving Ryu Min through the crack first, before diving after him. The passage ceiling shut behind them with a sound like a slamming tomb, plunging them into darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. Their labored breathing the only sound in the suffocating blackness. The poison still making Ryu Min's limbs twitch uncontrollably. His vision spotting with black dots as his heart struggled to pump the tainted blood through his veins. When suddenly, Kang's hand closed around his wrist with crushing force, the larger man dragging him forward through the tunnel. Their progress agonizingly slow as the passage twisted and turned. The air growing thicker with each step, the walls pressing in until they were forced to crawl on hands and knees. The stone scraping skin raw, when finally, blessedly, a faint glow appeared ahead. The tunnel opening into a circular chamber with walls made entirely of mirrors. Their reflections distorted and warped, some showing versions of themselves covered in wounds that hadn't happened yet. Others showing only skeletons where their bodies should be, the center of the room dominated by 2 stone altars, each bearing a single item. One held a golden crown studded with black gems that pulsed like living things, the other a simple iron key resting on a blood-stained pillow, the voice of the system whispering through the mirrors. "Choose your reward," it murmured, each word making the glass tremble. But choose wisely, and Kang was already moving toward the crown. His hand outstretched, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous, when Ryu Min's poisoned body finally gave out. His knees buckling as he collapsed to the cold floor, his vision tunneling. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Kang's fingers closing around the crown, the black gems flashing with malevolent light as the mirrors all shattered at once. Consciousness returned to Ryu Min like a punch to the gut, his body jerking upright with a gasp that tore at his raw throat. His hands instinctively flying to his chest where phantom pain still lingered from the poison's ravages. His skin clammy with cold sweat as his blurry vision struggled to adjust to the dim torchlight flickering across rough stone walls. The air thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic that coated his tongue with each panicked breath. His fingers scrabbling across the uneven ground beneath him until they closed around the familiar hilt of his dagger, the cool metal reassuring against his palm as his surroundings slowly came into focus. He was in a narrow corridor, barely wide enough for 2 men to walk abreast, the walls carved with strange symbols that seemed to shift when looked at directly. The ceiling lost in shadows so deep they appeared almost liquid, the torchlight coming from irregularly spaced sconces that cast more shadows than they dispelled. The corridor stretching endlessly in both directions with no visible doors or intersections. The silence so complete he could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, when suddenly the voice of the system slithered into his skull like a worm burrowing into rotten fruit. "Welcome back, little cheat." "Ow," it whispered, the words dripping with malicious amusement. "Did you enjoy your nap?" And before Ryu Min could respond, the ground beneath him trembled violently, the carved symbols on the walls beginning to glow an eerie green, the shadows between torchlights twisting into grotesque shapes that reached for him with clawed fingers, the air filling with the sound of grinding stone as the corridor began to reconfigure itself, the walls shifting like living things, the floor tilting at impossible angles as sections rose and fell like a demented puzzle. Ryu Min barely managing to keep his footing as he was carried along by the moving architecture, his free hand scraping against the rough stone as he tried in vain to steady himself, his mind racing to understand the rules of this new nightmare. When the corridor finally stilled with a final bone-rattling shudder, revealing a dead end just ahead, where the passage terminated in a massive stone door covered in intricate carvings of tormented figures, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes following Ryu Min's every movement. The door center dominated by a keyhole that pulsed with faint crimson light, the iron key from the mirror chamber suddenly burning in Ryu Min's pocket where he hadn't remembered putting it, its heat searing through the fabric of his pants. When a wet cough echoed from behind him, the sound so close it made his spine stiffen. His dagger flashing up defensively as he whirled to face Kang Jae-Ho slumped against the corridor wall, the once imposing warrior now a shadow of his former self, his skin pale and waxy, his lips tinged blue, his eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles. The golden crown still perched atop his head, but now fused to his skull with tendrils of black veins that pulsed visibly beneath his skin. His massive blade lying forgotten at his side, its once gleaming edge now dull and pitted, as if aged centuries in hours. His breath coming in ragged, wet gasps that spoke of fluid-filled lungs, his fingers twitching uncontrollably as he fixed Ryu Min with a gaze that was equal parts plea and warning his voice. When it came was barely recognizable, the words slurred and thick as if his tongue had swollen to twice its size. "Don't ... trust." The gifts he managed before his body convulsed violently, black bile spewing from his mouth to sizzle on the stone floor. the acrid stench making Ryu Min's eyes water, the sight confirming his worst suspicions about the crown's true nature. When suddenly Kang's head snapped up with unnatural speed, his eyes now completely black, his mouth stretching into a grin far too wide for a human face, the crown's gems pulsing in time with some unseen heartbeat, his voice changing to something guttural and ancient. "But you'll take it anyway, won't you, little rat?" The words slithering out between teeth that had grown sharp and needle-like, his body rising with jerky, puppet-like movements, his limbs bending at impossible angles as the black veins spread visibly across his skin. The transformation accelerating as Ryu Min backed away, his mind screaming at him to run, even as his survival instincts warned him turning his back would be fatal. The iron key in his pocket now burning so hot he could smell his own flesh cooking. The pain white-hot and all-consuming but somehow clarifying, cutting through the panic like a knife as he realized with sudden, terrible clarity what he had to do. His hand diving into his ruined pocket to grasp the key, despite the agony, his flesh sticking to the superheated metal as he yanked it free, his scream of pain echoing down the corridor as he lunged for the door, Kang's transformed body moving to intercept him with terrifying speed, those black-veined hands reaching with clawed fingers that whistled through the air just inches from Ryu Min's throat as he threw himself forward, the key slamming home into the pulsating keyhole, with a sound like a dying man's last breath. The door shuddering before splitting down the middle with a groan of ancient stone. The carved figures on its surface writhing as if in agony as the halves slid apart to reveal blinding white light beyond. Ryu Min stumbling through without looking back, the sound of Kang's enraged howl cut short as the doors slammed shut behind him with finality. The sudden silence almost as shocking as the scene before him. An endless library stretching as far as the eye could see, towering shelves carved from black marble reaching up into infinity, each groaning under the weight of countless leather-bound tomes. The air thick with the scent of old parchment and something faintly coppery. The only illumination coming from floating orbs of pale blue light that drifted lazily between the shelves. The floor made of polished wood that reflected the eerie glow and distorted patterns. The voice of the system whispering from between the stacks. "Welcome to the Archive of the Damned," it murmured, the words seeming to come from everywhere at once, where every book tells a story written in blood. And as Ryu Min took his first hesitant step forward, the nearest shelf trembled before a single book slid free, as if pushed by invisible hands. Its cover bound in what looked suspiciously like human skin, the title embossed in gold letters that spelled out his own name. The book bearing his name fell open before Ryu Min could decide whether to catch at its pages, fluttering like the wings of a dying bird before settling on a spread that glowed with eerie golden. Script the words swimming into focus to reveal not just his name, but his entire life story written in unsettling detail. His childhood in a nameless orphanage. The day he first stole to survive, the faces of people he'd long forgotten, all meticulously recorded alongside events he'd sworn never to tell another soul. The pages seeming to breathe as he watched. The ink shifting to display new text that described his current predicament with terrifying accuracy down to the exact number of lives he had left. 93/100ths. The burn on his thigh from the iron key still throbbing in time with the pulsing letters. When suddenly the words began rewriting themselves before his eyes, the ink flowing like liquid to form new sentences that described events yet to come. His hand reaching for the book, his fingers brushing the page, a scream building in his throat as the knowledge flooded his mind in a torrent of agony. The vision, so vivid it felt more real than the library around him. He would die 12 times in this room, each death more gruesome than the last, his body torn apart by things that waited between the shelves, his mind unraveling as the books whispered his darkest secrets back to him. The final death coming. When he finally reached the center of the library, only to discover the terrible truth that would break him completely. The vision cutting off as abruptly as it began, leaving Ryu Min gasping like a drowning man breaking the surface. His body drenched in cold sweat, his hands trembling so violently he nearly dropped the dagger still clenched in his fist. The book now lying innocently on the floor, where it had fallen, its pages blank once more. The library around him suddenly feeling less like a place of knowledge and more like the belly of some vast predator waiting to digest him. The floating orbs of light dimming as if in anticipation. the shadows between shelves deepening into pools of absolute blackness from which faint scraping sounds now emerged like claws on stone or teeth on bone. The scent of copper in the air growing stronger until he could taste it on his tongue, metallic and warm. When movement caught his eye from the periphery of his vision, a pale figure gliding between distant shelves. Its form indistinct, but unmistakably humanoid, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its arms too long, its fingers brushing the floor as it moved with eerie grace, disappearing behind a stack before Ryu Min could get a proper look, the air growing colder with each passing second, his breath visible and sudden. Puffs of white when a new sound joined the scraping. The unmistakable rustle of pages turning. Coming from all directions at once, the books on the shelves trembling as if unseen hands were browsing their contents. The whispers starting as barely audible murmurs, but growing steadily louder. A cacophony of voices speaking in languages both familiar and alien, all talking over each other in a maddening chorus that made Ryu Min's skull feel ready to split open. The words gradually resolving into something comprehensible, all saying the same thing in unison. "We see you, thief of lives. We know your sins." The accusation echoing through the vast space as the temperature dropped further, frost forming on the shelves nearest him. The pale figure appearing again, closer this time, its features still blurred but its intent unmistakably hostile. Its elongated fingers curling into claws as it began moving toward him with sudden jerky movements. Its progress interrupted by shelves that seemed to shift position when unobserved. The whispers growing more insistent, more personal, now recounting his every failure. Every cowardly act, every time he'd chosen survival over principle. The words sinking into his skin like hooks, each memory more painful than the last. When suddenly, the book at his feet flew open again, its pages fanning wildly before stopping on an illustration that made his blood freeze. A detailed drawing of the mirror chamber, where Kang had taken the crown, but with one crucial difference in the image. Ryu Min saw what he'd missed in his poisoned haze. A third altar emerging from the floor between the other two, bearing a simple silver locket that pulsed with clean white light, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. There had always been three choices, the third hidden, until someone refused the obvious temptations. The knowledge burning away some of the paralyzing fear as he realized the library was doing exactly what the other challenges had done. Presenting an obvious threat to distract from the real test, his eyes darting to the endless shelves as he understood with sudden clarity that the way out was unforward or back. But through the knowledge itself, the whispers rising to a deafening shriek as he reached for the book again. His fingers brushing the page just as the pale figure lunged from between shelves, barely 5 paces away. Its face finally visible, a grotesque mockery of human features with too many eyes and a mouth that split its head vertically. Rows of needle teeth glistening with saliva, its elongated limbs unfolding like a spider's legs as it sprang toward him. The stench of rotting parchment billowing from its gaping maw. Ryu Min's body moving on pure instinct as he rolled sideways, the creature's claws scoring deep grooves in the floor where he'd stood milliseconds before. His free hand snatching up the book as he came out of the roll, pages fluttering open to reveal new texts that shone so brightly it hurt to look at. The words searing themselves into his retinas. The truth is written in blood but read in light. The message repeating over and over as the creature recovered with unnatural speed, its many eyes tracking his every movement, its body coiling for another leap, the whispers now screaming in rage, the other books on the shelves rattling violently as if trying to break free. When Ryu Min did the only thing he could think of. He raised his bleeding hand. When had he been cut? And smeared crimson across the glowing page, the blood sizzling as it made contact the book, erupting in flames that burned cold and blue, the fire spreading up his arm without consuming flesh, the creature recoiling with a shriek that set his teeth on edge. The whispers cutting off abruptly, as every book in the library burst into identical blue flame simultaneously. The pale figure thrashing, as if the fire burned it as well, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. The shelves themselves beginning to warp and melt like wax under tremendous heat. The floor buckling beneath Ryu Min's feet as the entire library collapsed in on itself. The world dissolving into swirling blue fire that carried no heat, but instead an icy clarity that stripped away. all illusions revealing for one terrifying instant the true nature of the game, an endless labyrinth of suffering stretching infinitely in all directions. Populated by countless players, all trapped in their own private hells, the gods watching from on high with expressions of bored amusement. Before the vision too dissolved into white nothingness, leaving Ryu Min standing suddenly in a circular stone chamber. The book now gone, his dagger still in hand, his body unharmed except for the fading memory of pain. The walls covered in the same blue fire that now coalesced into a single point before him, forming a floating silver locket identical to the one in the book's illustration. Its surface etched with strange runes that pulsed gently, the voice of the system whispering with something resembling respect. "Well played, little rat," it murmured, as the locket drifted into his waiting palm. The metal warm against his skin, but the maze has only just begun, and with those words the floor vanished beneath him, sending him tumbling into darkness once more, the locket's glow the only light in the endless fall, its runes now clearly visible as they shifted to form a single word: remember. The fall lasted an eternity, and ended in an instant, Rumina's body slamming into a shallow pool of viscous liquid that clung to his skin like syrup, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a pained gasp as the silver locket burned against his chest, where it now hung from an unseen chain, its glow cutting through the murky darkness to reveal a cavernous space with walls that pulsed like living flesh, the ceiling lost in shadows that dripped with the same thick fluid now coating his body, scent coppery and sweet like rotting fruit left too long in the sun, his hands slipping as he tried to push himself upright, the liquid surface rippling with each movement to reveal glimpses of faces just beneath, some screaming, some laughing, all watching him with eyes that held no pupils. Just endless white voids that seemed to stare straight through his soul. The locket's warmth intensifying as the faces pressed closer to the surface, their mouths moving in unison though no sound emerged, their words forming directly in Ryu Min's mind, like thoughts that were on his own. "Welcome home, brother," they whispered, the greeting carrying a weight of familiarity that made his skin crawl. "You've been away too long," the liquid thickening around his legs as he tried to stand, the faces surging upward to form grasping hands that pulled at his clothes, his hair, his flesh with fingers, both solid and insubstantial, their touch leaving trails of frostbite wherever they brushed. The locket's glow flaring bright enough to banish them momentarily. The faces dissolving back into the pool with silent screams of protest, the brief respite giving Ryu Min just enough time to scramble onto a narrow outcropping of black rock that jutted from the liquid's edge, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he took in his surroundings properly for the first time. The cavern stretched endlessly in all directions, its fleshy walls lined with what looked like veins that pulsed with sluggish movement, the liquid he'd fallen into forming a vast, irregular lake dotted with similar rocky islands, the air thick with a humid warmth that carried the faintest hint of decay, when movement caught his eye from across the lake. A figure standing perfectly still on another outcropping, their features obscured by a tattered hood, their hands raised in what could have been greeting or warning. The distance too great to tell, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire, until the figure suddenly vanished, reappearing impossibly on a rock, much closer, then closer still, with each blink of Ryu Min's eyes, their movements not smooth, but flickering like a broken film reel, until they stood barely an arm's length away, the hood shadowing their face completely except for a mouth that stretched too wide when they spoke their voice, the rasp of dry leaves. "Underfoot you carry my heart," they said, one skeletal finger pointing to the locket at Ryu Min's chest. "But do you remember why?" The question hanging in the air like a guillotine blade, as the liquid around them began to churn violently, faces returning in greater numbers, their whispers rising to a deafening roar that shook the cavern walls, the locket burning hotter with each passing second, its runes now clearly visible as they rearranged themselves to form new words. The price is memory. The message pulsing in time with Ryu Min's suddenly racing heartbeat, the hooded figure reaching up with hands that had too many joints, their fingers brushing the edge of their hood as if to reveal what lay beneath, when the entire cavern convulsed like a living thing in pain, the fleshy walls splitting open to reveal countless eyes of varying sizes, all fixed on Ryu Min with terrible focus, the liquid lake boiling as the faces within began merging together, forming larger, more distinct shapes that pushed upward with grotesque determination. Their half-formed limbs thrashing as they tried to pull themselves onto the rocks, the hooded figure laughing with a sound like breaking glass. Their form flickering wildly as the chaos grew. "Choose quickly, little brother," they taunted. "Remember or forget. But decide before they make the choice for you." The warning punctuated by one of the emerging creatures finally hauling its bulk onto solid rock, its body a patchwork of mismatched parts that somehow moved with terrifying coordination, its too many eyes locking on to Ryu Min with unmistakable hunger. Its mouth splitting open vertically to reveal rows upon rows of needle-like teeth. The locket's heat becoming unbearable as the creature lurched forward. Its movements jerky at first, but quickly smoothing into something predatory. The other creatures closed behind, their numbers swelling by the second. The hooded figure watching with apparent amusement as Ryu Min backed toward the cavern wall, his dagger held before him in a shaking grip, his mind racing through options that grew more limited with each passing heartbeat. The locket's message burning itself into his vision even when he closed his eyes. The price is memory. The words taking on new meaning as fragments of images flashed through his mind. A woman's face, he should recognize, but did, and a burning village reflected in children's eyes. A promise made in blood and darkness. The memories slipping away, like smoke through his fingers even as he tried desperately to hold on to them. The first creature now close enough that he could smell the rot on its breath, its clawed hands reaching for him with terrifying patience, as if it knew escape was impossible. The locket's chain tightening around Ryu Min's neck like a noose, forcing him to make a choice, when with a snarl of defiance he grabbed the locket with his free hand. The metal searing his palm as he made his decision, the world exploding into white pain as memories that were his own flooded his mind in a torrent. He saw the hooded figure as they once were, a warrior of light standing against impossible darkness. He saw the moment they fell. The instant their heart was torn out and sealed away in silver, he saw the truth of the cavern. Not a trial, but a prison. And the creatures, not enemies, but fellow prisoners warped by centuries of confinement. The knowledge arriving with such intensity that his knees buckled, his dagger slipping from nerveless fingers as he clutched his head, the creatures pausing in their advance as the locket's glow intensified to blinding levels. The runes now swirling like living things across its surface, the hooded figure's laughter cutting off abruptly as they realized what he'd chosen. No. They screamed, the first real emotion in their voice. You weren't supposed to remember. Their form flickering violently as they lunged forward, their two many-jointed fingers reaching for the locket. When the cavern itself seemed to take a breath, the eyes and the walls all blinking in unison, the liquid lake drawing back like a tide before surging upward in a massive wave that crashed over everything. The force of it tearing the hooded figure away, even as Ryu Min clung to the rock with his last strength. The locket's glow forming a protective bubble around him as the world dissolved into chaos. Creatures screaming as the liquid consumed them, their forms melting back into the faceless mass from which they'd emerged. The walls themselves beginning to peel away like old skin, revealing endless void beneath. The locket's chain tightening further as it began to pull Ryu Min upward, away from the disintegrating cavern, the hooded figure's final words chasing him as he ascended. "This changes nothing, brother. The game was rigged from the start." Their voice fading as the light grew brighter, the pain in Ryu Min's head reaching unbearable levels as the memories continued to flood in. Each one a knife twisting in his psyche. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a throne room high above the world. And on that throne, a figure wearing Kang Jae-Ho's face smiling down at him with too many teeth. The crown on his head now fused completely with his flesh, his eyes twin pools of infinite darkness that held no trace of the man Ryu Min had briefly fought beside. The vision cutting off as consciousness fled, leaving only the locket's final message burning in his mind. The rememberer becomes the remembered. Consciousness returned in jagged fragments, Ryu Min's body jerking upright with a strangled gasp, as if his lungs had forgotten how to breathe, his fingers clawing at the cold stone beneath him, while his vision swam with afterimages of the throne room and that terrible smile that had haunted the edge of his unconsciousness.
Oh.
The silver locket still pressed against his sternum like a brand, its metal now ice-cold against his sweat-slicked skin. the carved runes glowing faintly in the dim light of whatever hellscape he'd been dumped into, now a vast coliseum of blackened bone and tarnished. Silver, its towering walls lined with faceless statues that wept thick dark fluid from empty eye sockets, the arena floor cracked and uneven. Like the skin of some long-dead giant, the air thick with the scent of burnt flesh and something sweetly rotten that coated the back of his throat with each ragged breath. The distant sound of cheering, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once, a cacophony of voices. Both human and decidedly not all screaming for blood, for spectacle, for the inevitable carnage about to unfold, the system's voice slithering through the noise like oil on water. Welcome to the grand ordeal, it purred, the words vibrating through Ryu Min's bones with malicious glee. Where legends are born and fools are unmade. The declaration punctuated by the grinding of stone on stone, as a massive gate at the far end of the arena began to rise, revealing only darkness beyond. The cheering growing frenzied as something stirred in that blackness. The sound of claws on stone, sending shivers down Ryu Min's spine as he scrambled to his feet. His dagger somehow back in his hand, though he didn't remember grabbing it, the blade's edge gleaming with newly sharpened malice, his body moving on pure instinct. As he backed toward the center of the arena, his eyes never leaving the yawning blackness of that gate. When the first creature emerged, not the hulking monstrosity he'd expected, but a slight figure draped in tattered silks that fluttered in some unfelt wind. Their movements eerily graceful as they stepped into the dim light, their face hidden behind a porcelain mask painted with a weeping maiden's visage, the delicate features at odds with the raw power radiating from their slender frame. Their head tilting to one side as they regarded Ryu Min with unseen eyes, the arena falling deathly silent in anticipation. The tension so thick it felt like walking through tar. When suddenly the masked figure moved, their body blurring as they crossed the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. Ryu Min barely managing to raise his dagger in time to deflect the first strike, a gleaming silver needle that had appeared in their hand as if by magic. The slender weapon humming as it sliced through air mere inches from his throat. The force of the blow sending shockwaves up his arm, even as he pivoted to avoid the follow-up. A sweeping kick aimed at his knees that would have shattered bone, had it connected the masked figure, flowing from one motion to the next with unnatural fluidity. Their attacks coming faster than Ryu Min could process, each near miss leaving thin trails of blood where the needles grazed his skin. The wounds burning as if dipped in acid, his movements growing sluggish as some venom worked its way through his veins. The cheers of the unseen crowd rising to a fever pitch with each fresh cut. The masked figure's porcelain face never changing expression, even as their assault grew more vicious, more personal, their needles finding flesh with increasing frequency. When suddenly the locket at Ryu Min's chest flared with icy heat, the pain cutting through the venom. Haze just long enough for him to serially see the truth hidden beneath the mask's illusion. The briefest flicker of something human in the way the figure hesitated when their needle grazed the locket's chain. The almost imperceptible tremor in their wrist as they pulled back for the killing strike. And in that split second of clarity, Ryu Min understood this wasn't some mindless monster, but another player like him, trapped and twisted by the game, their humanity buried beneath layers of conditioning and pain.
Ow.
The realization hitting him like a physical blow, even as he dodged another flurry of strikes his body, moving on autopilot as his mind raced for a solution that didn't end with one of them dead. The locket's glow intensifying as if responding to his thoughts, its runes rearranging to form a single word. Remember, the command pulsing in time with his racing heart as the masked figure launched their final attack. Their body becoming a silver blur as they aimed for his throat. Ryu Min's dagger coming up in a desperate parry, even as his free hand shot out to grab the edge of that porcelain mask, his fingers closing around cold ceramic as the world seemed to slow to a crawl, the needle's tip hovering millimeters from his jugular. His own blade poised to bury itself in the figure's gut, the crowd's roar fading to a distant hum as the mask came away with a sound like tearing flesh, revealing beneath it not some hideous monster, but the face of a young woman. Her features gaunt and pale, but undeniably human, her eyes wide with shock and something else recognition, her lips forming a name that made Ryu Min's blood run cold. Minja, the word barely a whisper, but carrying the weight of 1,000 memories, the locket between them burning white-hot as the arena dissolved around them. The false reality crumbling like ash in the wind to reveal a sterile white room neither of them had ever seen. But both somehow remembered the walls lined with glass pods containing countless bodies, floating in amber fluid, each face identical to theirs. Each pair of eyes staring sightlessly into nothingness. The System's voice now coming not from some disembodied void, but from a speaker embedded in the ceiling, its tone no longer mocking, but clinical, detached. Subject pair 7198 exhibiting unexpected recall. It droned, recommending immediate termination and recycling. The words sending a spike of primal terror through Ryu Min as the woman his sister. His mind, supplied with sudden terrible certainty, grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her nails digging into his flesh as she pulled him toward a door that hadn't been there a moment before. Her voice raw with urgency. "They'll wipe us again if they catch us," she hissed, her eyes darting to a blinking red light in the ceiling corner. "We have to get back to the game before they—" Her words cut off abruptly as the door exploded inward, revealing not the expected guards, but Kang Jae-Ho's corrupted form, his crown now fused completely with his skull, his eyes pits of swirling darkness. His mouth stretched in that same terrible smile from Ryu Min's vision. His voice, when he spoke, layered with countless others. "Little rats always return to the maze," he chuckled, stepping forward with deliberate slowness. "But you two were never supposed to remember there was a maze at all." The admission hanging in the air between them, as the locket's chain snapped without warning, the silver pendant falling to the floor with a sound like a dying breath. The last thing Ryu Min saw before the world went black once more was his sister. No subject 7198B. Lunging for Kang's throat with a scream of pure rage, her body already beginning to glitch and distort as the system reasserted control, her final words echoing in the emptiness left behind. "Find me in the next cycle." Darkness gave way to searing pain as Ryu Min's eyes flew open to a world on fire. His body sprawled across broken pavement that radiated unnatural heat through his clothes. The sky above churning with smoke and embers that fell like malignant snow, each glowing speck hissing where it touched his exposed skin. The air thick with the stench of burning flesh and something sharper, something electric that made his teeth ache, his head pounding with the aftermath of whatever the system had done to him. To them, the memory of his sister's face, already fading like a dream upon waking. Her name slipping through his mental fingers like smoke, even as he desperately tried to hold on to it. The broken locket chain dangling empty from his neck, its missing weight more unsettling than its earlier heat. His dagger miraculously still clutched in his right hand, though the blade now bore fresh notches along its edge. As if it had seen battle without him, the distant sound of collapsing buildings and screams, both human and otherwise, forming a hellish symphony that set his nerves on edge. The ground trembling beneath him with each new explosion that lit up the ruined skyline. The skeletal remains of skyscrapers clawing at the burning heavens like the fingers of drowning men when movement caught his eyes. Flicker of shadow darting between collapsed vehicles that littered the street, their melted frames testament to whatever catastrophe had befallen this place. The figure moving with purposeful stealth that set Ryu Min's instincts screaming, his body tensing as he rolled behind the scant cover of an overturned delivery truck. Its paint bubbling from residual heat, his breath coming in controlled bursts as he tracked the shadow's progress through the warped metal and broken glass. The silhouette resolving into something distinctly humanoid, but wrong in ways he couldn't quite articulate, the proportions slightly off. The movements too fluid. The way it paused every few steps to tilt its head as if listening to voices only it could hear, its path bringing it inexorably closer to Ryu Min's hiding spot with each passing second. The dagger in his hand feeling woefully inadequate against whatever this thing was. When suddenly the world erupted in blinding light and concussive force as something massive impacted the street barely 50 meters away. The shockwave flipping vehicles like toys and sending Ryu Min skidding across the pavement despite his grip on the truck's undercarriage, his vision widening out momentarily from the pain of ribs cracking on impact, his ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound, his body moving on pure instinct as he scrambled behind a collapsed concrete barrier just as the shadow figure lunged from the smoke. Its form now fully visible, a mockery of human shape wrapped in strips of blackened cloth that seemed to move independently. Its face a smooth oval, devoid of features, except for a vertical slit where its mouth should be. The edges of that slit peeling back to reveal row upon row of needle-like teeth as it scented the air, its elongated fingers ending in curved talons that scraped against the pavement with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Its head snapping toward Ryu Min as hiding place with terrifying precision, just as the ground between them split open with a sound like tearing flesh. A massive tendril bursting from the fissure to wrap around the shadow creature with terrifying speed, yanking it downward into the depths before the fissure sealed itself with an audible slurp, leaving no trace that anything had ever been there. The entire sequence lasting less than 3 heartbeats, the sudden silence more unnerving than the preceding chaos. When a hand clamped over Ryu Min's mouth from behind, a voice whispering directly into his ear with urgent familiarity, "Don't scream or we're both dead," command sending his heart into overdrive, even as he recognized the voice not his sister's, but one equally impossible, belonging to a man who should be either corrupted or dead, the grip loosening just enough for Ryu Min to turn his head and confirm what his ears told him, Kang Jae-Ho's face, staring back at him with none of the crown's corruption. His eyes human and clear, though shadowed with exhaustion, his famous blade nowhere in sight, his clothes torn and blood-stained but free of the black veins that had once marred his skin. His expression grim as he jerked his head toward a nearby sewer grate. "We have maybe 90 seconds before the next sweep," he muttered, already moving with the silent efficiency of a predator. "And I didn't just burn my last favor with the resistance to watch you die in the open," the words making no sense yet carrying the weight of truth, Ryu Min's body following before his mind could protest. The two of them slipping into the dank darkness below, just as the sky above split open with a sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering. Something vast and winged descending through the rift with a scream that turned Ryu Min's bones to jelly. The last glimpse of the surface world before Kang slammed the grate shut, revealing streets that were no longer empty but teeming with figures both human and monstrous, all frozen in various poses of flight or combat as the winged thing passed over them, their bodies dissolving into black smoke that the creature inhaled with shuddering pleasure. The sight burned into Ryu Min's retinas as they fled through knee-deep water that smelled of rust and rotting meat, the tunnel walls vibrating with each footstep of whatever walked the streets above, Kang leading them through a maze of turns with the confidence of someone who demade this journey many times before. The darkness so complete, Ryu Min had to place a hand on the other man's shoulder to avoid getting lost, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions. When finally, Kang stopped before a section of wall that looked no different from any other his fingers, tracing a pattern on the wet concrete that made the surface ripple like water, the wall parting to reveal a hidden chamber lit by flickering emergency lights, the space no larger than a prison cell, but containing a surprising array of equipment, weapons racks, medical supplies, even what looked like a rudimentary communications setup arranged with military precision. The air inside stale but breathable, the relative safety of the space doing nothing to ease the tension in Ryu Min's shoulders as Kang turned to face him properly for the first time. The older man's expression unreadable as he reached into his jacket and produced a familiar silver locket, its chain repaired, its surface gleaming despite the dim light. "You'll be wanting this back," he said, tossing it to Ryu Min with deliberate care. "Though I can't promise it'll work the same way twice," the words loaded with meaning Ryu Min couldn't begin to parse. The locket warm against his palm but inert, its runes dark and unmoving. The questions bubbling up faster than he could voice them. How was Kang here? What happened to the crown? Who were the resistance? Where was his sister? When Kang held up a hand to forestall them all, his eyes darting to a blinking red light on the communications console. "We have about 6 minutes before the next patrol passes this sector," he said, his voice low and urgent. "So I'll give you the quick version. Everything you remember is both true and not true. The game exists, but not the way you think it does. The gods watching are just bored technicians in a control room, light years away. And your sister is currently running through her 73rd iteration of the same simulation you just escaped." The words hitting like hammer blows, each one more unbelievable than the last. Ryu Min's grip tightening on the locket as if it could somehow make sense of this madness. when suddenly the console's light turned from red to green, Kang's face going pale as he lunged for the weapons rack. There early he snarled, tossing Ryu Min a pistol that felt alien in his hands, which means someone talked. The accusation hanging in the air as the hidden door began to vibrate, the concrete rippling like disturbed water. The sound of something massive moving through the tunnels beyond, sending rivulets of dust cascading from the ceiling. Kang's next words barely audible over the growing noise. When the door goes, aim for the glowing spots. He instructed, checking his own weapon with practiced ease, and whatever you do, don't let them touch you. The warning coming a second too late as the wall exploded inward in a shower of debris, revealing not the expected mechanical horrors, but a single slender figure draped in familiar tattered silks. Their porcelain mask cracked but still intact. The weeping maiden's face somehow more terrifying in this context. Their silver needles already spinning through the air before Ryu Min could react. One embedding itself in Kang's throat with a sickening thunk, the other grazing Ryu Min's cheek before he could raise the pistol, his finger squeezing the trigger on pure reflex. The gun's recoil, startling him almost as much as the explosion of black ichor from the masked figure's shoulder. Their head tilting in that same unnatural way as they regarded their wound with apparent curiosity. Their free hand rising to touch the injury before their mask split down the middle with a sound like breaking bone. The porcelain falling away to reveal Ryu Min's own face staring back at him. The features twisted into a smile that held no warmth, no humanity. Only the cold amusement of something that had worn his skin many times before. Its voice a perfect mimicry of his own when it spoke. Cycle 74 begins now. The gunshot still echoed in Ryu Min's ears as the bullet tore through the doppelganger's shoulder. Black ichor sprang across the bunker walls in grotesque arcs. The creature, barely flinching as it continued to smile with his face, its head tilting further than any human neck should allow. The crack in its mask spreading like spiderwebs until the porcelain shattered completely, revealing not just his features but every version of him that had ever existed younger. Older, scarred, broken each, flickering across its skin like a malfunctioning hologram. Its voice layering with countless echoes of his own as it spoke again. "You always pull the trigger," it mused, stepping over Kang's choking form with casual indifference. "But you never ask why you're holding the gun." The words slithering into Ryu Min's skull like worms. His finger tightening on the trigger again even as his mind screamed that this was wrong. That no weapon could kill something that wore his own face as a mask. The pistol bucking in his hand as he emptied the clip into the creature's chest, each round punching through its torso with wet, meaty impacts that should have dropped a man. But only made the thing laugh. Its form rippling like disturbed water as the bullets passed clean through. The wounds sealing instantly with a sound like sucking mud. Its elongated fingers reaching for him with terrifying patience. The needle still embedded in Kang's throat, glinting in the flickering emergency lights as the older man clawed at his own neck, his lips already turning blue. His eyes locking onto Ryu Min's with desperate intensity. His mouth forming silent words that might have been run or remember. The choice ripped away as the doppelganger's hand closed around Ryu Min's wrist. Its touch burning like dry ice, the pain radiating up his arm in nauseating waves as his skin blackened and cracked beneath its grip. The locket at his chest suddenly flaring to life so violently it scorched his shirt away. The runes blazing with golden light that made the creature recoil with its first show of genuine emotion, fear, raw and primal. Its many faces contorting in unison as it released him hissing like a cornered animal as the light spread through the bunker, illuminating every corner in stark relief. Revealing what should have been impossible. The walls weren't concrete at all, but flesh, pulsing, and veined. The floor, not tile, but something organic that squished unpleasantly underfoot. Even Kang's choking form flickering at the edges like a bad transmission, his true appearance bleeding through in jagged fragments, a younger man with haunted eyes and a shock of white hair, his features similar enough to Ryu Min's to suggest relation. His mouth now moving with clear urgency, though no sound emerged, the locket's light growing brighter still, its heat becoming unbearable as the runes rearranged themselves mid-air, forming words that burned themselves directly into Ryu Min's retinas. The cycle can be broken. The message repeating in overlapping layers as the doppelganger shrieked in frustration, its form destabilizing as the light penetrated its disguise. the illusion of the bunker crumbling like ash in the wind to reveal the truth beneath a sterile white room, identical to the one from his earlier vision. The walls lined with glass pods containing countless rumens in various states of decay. Some fresh as morning, others little more than skeletons floating in amber fluid. The doppelganger itself revealed as a writhing mass of black tendrils clustered around a single glowing core that pulsed like a diseased heart. Its humanoid shape merely a puppet worn for his benefit, its shrieks, now deafening as it lashed out blindly, its tendrils slicing through equipment and flesh with equal ease. Kano, the white-haired man barely rolling aside as one whipped through where his head had been. His true voice finally audible as he shouted over the chaos. "The locket, Ryu, use it on the core." The command cutting through the noise like a knife, Ryu Min's body moving before his mind could process. His free hand closing around the blazing pendant as he lunged forward. The distance between him and the creature's core vanishing in a single heartbeat. His arm plunging elbow deep into the squirming mass of tendrils, the pain instant and all-consuming as they wrapped around his limb. Like razor wire slicing through muscle and tendon with ease, his blood spraying in hot arcs across the white floor, his vision graying at the edges from shock. But his fingers found purchase on that pulsing core, the locket making contact with a sound like 1,000 panes of glass shattering simultaneously, the creature's shrieks reaching a fever pitch as golden light erupted from the point of contact, the tendrils withering to ash in an expanding wave that consumed everything it touched, the core crumbling like rotten fruit beneath his grip, the light spreading outward in an unstoppable tide that shattered the glass pods lining the walls, their occupants dissolving into golden mist that swirled around Ryu Min like a cyclone. The voices of countless iterations whispering in unison, their words finally clear after lifetimes of static. "Remember us," they pleaded as the light grew blinding, "and break the cycle." The command ringing in his skull even as the world dissolved around him. The white room folding in on itself like a bad dream. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was the white-haired man, his brother, his mind supplied with sudden, unshakable certainties, miling as the light took him to his lips, forming words that carried the weight of prophecy. "Find me in the next one." Darkness. Then a gasp of stale air as Ryu Min's eyes flew open to a familiar nightmare, his back pressed against cold stone, his fingers curled around a dagger's hilt. The voice of the system slithering into his skull with mocking familiarity. "Welcome to the trial of the gods," it crooned, the words dripping with malice. "Survive or perish," the declaration identical to his very first awakening in this hell. The cavernous arena around him filled with confused players just beginning to stir. The scent of fear and sweat thick in the air. The distant roar of something massive approaching from the shadows beyond. But this time something was different. The locket still warm against his chest. Though it shouldn't exist yet, its weight, a secret comfort. The memories of countless cycles swirling in his mind like half-remembered dreams. The knowledge that this time he wasn't just another player, wasn't just another rat in the maze, but something more, something dangerous. The realization settling over him like a second skin as he rose to his feet. His eyes scanning the crowd, not with terror, but calculation. His grip on the dagger sure and steady, because the game had changed. The rules were his to break. And the gods watching from on high were about to learn what happens when lab rats bite back. The arena trembled with the approaching monster's footsteps. The same grotesque wolf-serpent hybrid from his first cycle surging from the shadows with its maw dripping acid, its yellowed fangs glistening under the flickering torchlight. But Ryu Min didn't flinch, didn't scramble back in terror like the dozens of players around him. His body coiled with the memories of 100 deaths and 1,000 battles. The locket's warmth against his chest a constant reminder that this time was different. His eyes locking onto the creature's movements with preternatural clarity. Seeing not just the beast before him, but every variation he defought across countless iterations. The way its left hind leg favored a slight limp, after 3 consecutive right turns, how its nostrils flared wider before it pounced, the microscopic delay in its tail whip that left its underbelly exposed for exactly 1.3 seconds knowledge bought with blood and pain and repeated failure, now crystallizing into perfect Lethal understanding, the screams of panicked players fading into background noise as he moved, his dagger flashing upward in a precise arc that intercepted the creature's first strike not by luck but by design. The blade-est edge scraping along a fang with a shower of sparks, before finding the soft tissue beneath, its jaw-black ichor spraying across his face as the beast recoiled with a shriek that shook dust from the arena, sealing the other survivors, staring in stunned silence at the madman, who had actually drawn first blood, their terror momentarily eclipsed by disbelief. When the system's voice crackled through the air with uncharacteristic static, anomaly detected in Trial 7198A, it announced, the words laced with something almost like concern, as administering corrective measures. The declaration followed by a sound like tearing fabric as the arena's far wall dissolved into swirling pixels. A second monster emerging, this one a hulking brute of exposed muscle and jagged bone that had unappeared in any of Ryu Min's previous cycles. Its mismatched eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto him with terrifying intelligence. Its lipless mouth peeling back in what might have been a grin as it charged directly toward him. The original creature forgotten. The rules of the trial clearly rewritten on the fly to eliminate this unexpected variable. But Ryu Min was already moving, his body weaving between panicked players with effortless grace, his mind analyzing the new threat escalate and reach in probable attack patterns, even as he dodged its first earth-shattering blow. The stone where he'd stood a moment earlier reduced to powder, shockwaves sending 3 nearby survivors flying like ragdolls, their bodies crumpling against the arena walls with sickening crunches. The locket at his chest burning hotter with each passing second, its runes rearranging beneath his shirt to form a single glowing command. Ascend. The word searing itself into his vision even as he rolled beneath the brute's follow-up swing. His dagger finding purchase in the soft hollow behind its knee. The blade sinking deep before being wrenched from his grip as the creature bellowed and spun, its massive fist catching him square in the ribs and sending him skidding across the blood-slicked stone, his body screaming in protest as bones cracked and organs bruised, his vision swimming with black spots that slowly resolved to reveal the brute looming over him. Its fist raised for the killing blow, when a flash of silver streaked through the air, a throwing knife embedding itself in the creature's with unerring precision. Its howl of pain cut short as a second blade found its throat, a third its heart. The attacks coming from high above where a familiar figure perched on the arena's crumbling upper tiers, her tattered cloak fluttering like a battle standard. Her porcelain mask reflecting the torchlight as she gestured toward a previously hidden alcove near the ceiling. The message clear, even without words. The path upward was there. She was buying him time to reach it. The revelation that his sister, or some iteration of her, was here now, working against the system's designs, sending a surge of adrenaline through his battered body as he forced himself upright. His ribs protesting every breath as he sprinted for the arena wall, the brute momentarily distracted by this new threat, its massive hands clawing at the knives protruding from its flesh. The original monster still wreaking havoc among the remaining players, their screams forming a hellish chorus that drowned out all other sound, his fingers finding purchase in the uneven stone as he began to climb, each handhold sending fresh jolts of agony through his broken body, his blood leaving dark smears on the wall as he ascended toward the alcove. The locket's heat now unbearable, its chains searing his neck as the runes blazed through the fabric of his shirt, their light pulsing in time with his racing heart. The alcove's edge finally within reach when the brute's roar shook the arena again. The sound closer than it should have been, Ryu Min's head whipping around to see the creature scaling the wall with terrifying speed, its claws digging into stone like butter, its ruined eye leaking black sludge as it closed the distance between them. His sister Fit was her now, engaged with the original monster below, her silver needles flashing as she danced just out of reach of its claws, her movements too fluid, too perfect. The realization dawning that she wasn't entirely human either, not anymore. Whatever the system had done to her across countless cycles had remade her into something else, something that could fight on equal terms with the game's horrors. The brute's breath, hot on Ryu Min's neck, as he hauled himself into the alcove at last. The narrow tunnel beyond barely wide enough to crawl through, the creature's massive shoulders getting stuck as it tried to follow its bellows of frustration, shaking dust from the ceiling as Ryu Min scrambled deeper into the darkness. The locket's light now his only guide, as the sounds of battle faded behind him, the tunnel sloping upward at a steep angle that made every movement agony, his broken ribs grinding against each other with each labored breath. His vision narrowing to the patch of illuminated stone just ahead, when suddenly the tunnel opened into a circular chamber he'd never seen in any previous cycle. Its walls covered in glowing blue runes that pulsed like a heartbeat, its ceiling lost in shadow. Its floor, a perfect mirror that reflected not his current broken form, but countless other versions of himself. Ain't some younger, some older, some so maimed, they were barely recognizable as human. The sight holding him frozen for a heartbeat too long, the locket choosing that moment to grow cold against his skin, its chains snapping as it fell toward the mirrored floor. The impact sending ripples across the surface like water, the reflections reaching up in unison as the locket sank beneath the glass. Their hands pressing against the underside as if begging to be freed, the runes on the walls, flaring bright enough to burn the system's voice, erupting from everywhere at once. The words laced with static, and something beneath it fear, initiating purge protocol. The declaration followed by a sound like 1,000 windows shattering as the chamber's walls began to collapse inward, the mirrored floor cracking to reveal swirling darkness below. Ryu Min's body tipping forward as the ground beneath him disintegrated, his hands scrambling for purchase that didn't exist. His vision filled with the sight of his own countless reflections, reaching for him as he fell into the void, their mouths moving in perfect sync as they whispered the same phrase over and over, the words following him down into the abyss. Remember who you really are. The void swallowed him whole, suffocating darkness that pressed against his skin like a living thing, the whispers of his reflections still echoing in his ears, even as the last traces of light from the collapsing chamber vanished. The sensation of falling endless and directionless, his body tumbling through emptiness with no up or down, no left or right. Only the cold certainty that the system had finally decided he was too dangerous to leave alive. His thoughts scattering like startled birds as he tried in vain to find purchase in the nothingness. When suddenly impact, brutal and unexpected, his body slamming into something solid with enough force to shatter bones. The pain blooming outward from multiple points before his vision whited out entirely. Consciousness returning in flickering bursts as he found himself sprawled across cold metal grating, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles, blood pooling beneath him from wounds he couldn't yet feel through the adrenaline, his remaining eye. When had he lost the other? Struggling to focus on the dim red lights flickering high above, the air thick with the scent of ozone and something chemical that burned his throat with each ragged breath. The surface beneath him vibrating with a deep, rhythmic hum that suggested machinery on an unimaginable scale, his shattered body twitching as he tried to push himself upright, the motion sending fresh waves of agony through his ruined frame, his fingers slipping in his own blood as he collapsed again, his remaining eye rolling upward to take in the impossible sight stretching above him, not a sky, but an endless ceiling of blinking lights and twisting pipes that vanished into darkness in every direction. The space so vast it defied comprehension, the realization dawning that this was no simulation, no carefully crafted trial, but something far worse, the truth he'd been chasing across countless cycles laid bare at last. When footsteps echoed from somewhere in the gloom, measured and unhurried, the silhouette that emerged from the shadows resolving into a figure. Both familiar and utterly aliened the white-haired man from his visions. But different now, his features sharper, his eyes glowing. Faintly blue in the dim light, his body encased in some form of armored suit that pulsed with the same energy as the locket, his expression unreadable as he crouched beside Ryu Min's broken form, his voice, when he spoke, layered with something mechanical beneath the human tones. "You weren't supposed to make it this far," he admitted, his gloved hand hovering over Ryu Min's chest, as if unsure whether to heal or finish the job. "The system has protocols for anomalies like you, but you kept slipping through, cycle after cycle." The words sparking something in Ryu Min's shattered mind. Flashes of memory that didn't belong to him, a laboratory bathed in white light. Rows upon rows of glass pods containing sleeping figures. A rebellion that ended in fire and screaming. The white-haired man standing over a control panel with tears in his eyes as he initiated the purge. The images coming too fast to process. His body convulsing as the memories overrode his own. the white-haired man's hands suddenly firm on his shoulders, holding him down as the seizure worsened. "Breathe, brother," he urged. The words sending another jolt through Ryu Min's system. "You're breaking the conditioning, but you have to stay with me." His voice cutting through the chaos in Ryu Min's mind like a lifeline. The seizure gradually subsiding to leave him trembling and drenched in cold sweat. His vision clearing just enough to see the white-haired man, his brother, holding out a familiar silver locket. Its surface now cracked and blackened, but still faintly glowing. "This was Mother's," he explained, pressing it into Ryu Min's bloody hand. "She encoded it with the truth before they took her, before they turned us into this." His gesture encompassing the vast space around them, the implications settling over. Ryu Min like a shroud. They were unplayers in a game, but prisoners in a machine. Their memories rewritten their bodies, repurposed their suffering entertainment. For some unseen audience, the revelation should have broken him, but instead it ignited something cold and furious in his chest. His shattered body somehow finding the strength to grip the locket tighter, its cracked surface flaring to life at his touch. The runes rearranging to form a new message. "Wake the others." The command pulsing in time with his heartbeat, his brother's eyes widening in alarm as the machinery around them suddenly roared to life. The rhythmic hum becoming a deafening whine as alarms began blaring from every direction. The red lights shifting to strobe blue, sound of rushing footsteps, and shouted orders echoing through the vast space. His brother's grip tightening on his shoulder as he leaned close to be heard over the chaos. "They're coming," he warned, his voice urgent. "You have to run before they reset you." The words barely registered as Ryu Min's body began healing at an impossible rate, bones snapping back into place, wounds sealing shut, its missing eye regenerating in a burst of agony that left him gasping. The locket's glow, spreading through his veins like liquid fire, burning away the last of the system's conditioning. The memories slotting into place with terrifying clarity. His name wasn't Ryu Min. It hadn't been for a very long time. He was Subject 7198A, one of thousands bred for this endless war. His brother 7198B, standing beside him now, after countless cycles apart. Their mother the scientist who tried to save them. The locket, her final gift, smuggled into the simulation, the pieces fitting together even as armed figures in black armor poured into the chamber from all sides. Their weapons humming with lethal energy, their faces hidden behind featureless helmets. His brother moving to stand between them and Ryu Min's still healing form, his armored suit flaring to life with blue energy. "Go," he shouted over his shoulder. "Find the others. Wake them up. I'll hold them off." The declaration followed by a surge of power that sent the first wave of attackers flying. The chamber descending into chaos as Ryu Min forced himself upright, his newly regenerated body trembling with unfamiliar strength. The locket now fused to his palm, its light spreading up his arm in intricate patterns that matched his brother's armor. The knowledge of what he had to do crystal clear, even as more black-armored figures flooded the chamber, their weapons. Charging with a sound like screaming metal, his brother's voice, cutting through the din one last time as he turned to face the onslaught, his words carrying the weight of a promise. "I'll find you in the next cycle." The locket's light seared through Ryu Min's veins like liquid lightning, its glow spreading across his skin in fractal patterns that mirrored his brother's armor. Each glowing line burning away another layer of the system's lies, his true memories flooding back in a torrent of pain and clarity, the research facility where they'd been born in tubes rather than wombs. The endless tests and simulations designed to break them down and rebuild them as perfect weapons. Their mother's face, as she whispered her final words before the purge teams dragged her away. The locket warm in his child-sized hands as she promised it would keep him safe. The pieces of his shattered identity reforming just as the black-armored enforcers opened fire. Their energy weapons carving through the air with a sound like tearing fabric. His brother moving faster than should have been possible to intercept the barrage, his armored form blurring as he became a living shield between Ryu Min and certain death. The impacts sending him skidding backward but not falling. His voice strained but steady as he shouted over the chaos. "The ventilation shaft behind you. Go now." The command punctuated by another volley that sent sparks flying from his armor. Ryu Min's body moving before his mind could protest. His newly awakened strength propelling him toward the rusted metal grate set low in the chamber wall. His fingers finding purchase on the corroded edges. As he wrenched it free with a scream of protesting metal, the opening barely wide enough to squeeze through. The darkness beyond smelling of stale air and something faintly organic. His last glimpse of the chamber, showing his brother surrounded by at least 20 enforcers, his armor cracked and smoking. But still standing, still fighting his glowing fists, carving through black armor like paper, as he bought Ryu Min every second he could. The sight burned into Ryu Min's retinas as he turned and crawled into the cramped shaft. The metal vibrating beneath him as the battle raged behind. The locket's light his only guide as he navigated the twisting passages. His enhanced vision gradually adjusting to the gloom to reveal walls covered in strange glyphs that pulsed faintly in time with his heartbeat. The air growing thicker with each passing moment, the scent of decay becoming overpowering until he rounded a corner and found the source dozens of bodies stuffed unceremoniously into side passages, their uniforms marking them as facility staff, their faces frozen in expressions of terror, their deaths recent enough that the blood still glistened wet in the dim light. The sight confirming what his returning memory suggested: the system was collapsing, the carefully maintained order breaking down. Someone or something had started a purge before he'd ever escaped the simulation. The realization driving him forward with renewed urgency. The shaft eventually opening into a massive vertical chamber lined with countless glass pods, each containing a floating figure connected to a tangle of tubes and wires. Their faces eerily similar to his own with only minor variations. The truth of what he was hitting him like a physical blow, he was unto person but a product. One of hundreds of identical models designed to die and die again for someone else's amusement. The locket in his hand flaring brighter as if in protest, its light revealing a control console at the chamber's center. The screens flickering with error messages and quarantine alerts. The words "containment breach" flashing in angry red across every surface. The chair before the console occupied by a corpse still wearing a scientist's coat. The back of their head blown out by what could only have been an execution, their stiff fingers still curled around a sidearm. The scene painting a clear picture of desperation and last stands. Ryu Min's approach cautious as he scanned the controls. The symbols meaningless at first, until the locket pulsed against his palm, its light spreading to the console in glowing tendrils that translated the text before his eyes. These were the master controls for the simulation pods, each screen showing hundreds of active participants trapped in their own private hells. The names all variations of his own, the status bars indicating most were nearing critical failure after too many resets. His hands moving of their own accord as he began inputting commands the locket somehow guided him to know. The system resisting at every step with increasingly frantic warnings, the chamber shaking as distant explosions rumbled through the facility. The lights flickering as power fluctuated, when suddenly one screen changed to show his brother's face, his armor shattered, blood streaming from a dozen wounds as he fought. Back to back with a familiar figure, the porcelain-masked woman from the arena, her disguise broken to reveal features nearly identical to theirs, her movements just as lethally precise as she wielded twin silver knives. Against the endless tide of enforcers, the realization that she was another sibling, another subject hitting Ryu Min like a hammer blow, even as the console beeped urgently, a new message flashing. Emergency release initiated. The words sending a jolt through the chamber as pod after pod began hissing open, the nutrient-rich is spilling across the floor as hundreds of identical figures stirred for the first time in what might have been years, their eyes fluttering open with varying degrees of awareness. Some screaming, others silent with shock, few immediately reaching for the nearest weapons with trained efficiency. The locket's light now so bright it hurt to look at, its message clear: this was the beginning. The first true rebellion against the system that had created and tortured them. The screen suddenly switching to a view of the facility's upper levels, where armored figures unlike the enforcers were fighting their way downward, their weapons crude but effective, their faces hidden behind makeshift masks, their leader unmistakable, even at a distance. The white-haired scientist from his visions, the one he'd instinctively known, was his mother. Her expression fierce as she directed the assault, the pieces falling into place with perfect clarity. She'd survived the purge, built a resistance, and now her children were waking up to join the fight. The console beeping again as a final message appeared, this time in his mother's handwriting. "Find me in the control center." The words thrumming with promise and danger in equal measure. the chamber shaking violently as an explosion rocked the facility's upper levels. Dust and debris raining from the ceiling as the newly freed subjects began helping each other from their pods. Some still weak from prolonged immersion, others already moving with purpose toward the exits, their shared genetics creating an unspoken understanding between them. The locket's light dimming slightly as its job neared completion. Its final gift to Ryu Min, a set of coordinates flashing across his vision, the Control Center's location deep in the facility's heart. The path there marked with danger signs and quarantine warnings, the choice before him clear: stay and help his newly awakened siblings, or push forward, alone to find the woman who de-started it all. The decision made easier when a hand gripped his shoulder, the porcelain-masked woman, his sister, standing beside him despite having just been on screen fighting elsewhere. Her armor scorched and bloody, but her grip firm, her voice steady, despite the chaos around them. Go, she urged, her eyes the same shade as his and their brothers. We'll handle things here. But she needs you, the words carrying weight beyond their surface, meaning the bond between them, humming with something deeper than blood or shared suffering. Ryu Min, nodding once before turning toward the chamber's darkest corner, where the locket's coordinates pulsed brightest. His sister's voice following him as he disappeared into the shadows. Wake the others. Break the cycle. The darkness beyond the pod chamber swallowed Ryu Min whole, the locket's glow reduced to a faint pulse in his palm as he navigated the twisting service corridors, each step carrying him deeper into the facility's rotting heart. The walls here streaked with strange fungal growths that pulsed in time with his heartbeat, the air thick with the scent of decay and something else, something alive and watching. The coordinates his mother had left burning behind his eyes like brand marks, guiding him through the maze of crumbling passageways where the lights had long since failed. The only sounds his own ragged breathing and the distant drip of moisture echoing through pipes that shouldn't exist in a place like this. When suddenly the corridor opened into a vast space that defied all logic, a cavernous chamber lined with row upon row of ancient-looking pods. Unlike the sterile ones he'd just left, these constructed of tarnished brass and fogged glass, their surfaces etched with runes that matched those on his locket, the fluid inside not clear but a deep, ominous red that shimmered with its own inner light. The pods connected by a web of pulsating veins that ran across floor and ceiling alike.
Ow.
The entire chamber throbbing like some gigantic heart. The realization dawning that this was no ordinary facility, but something far older, far darker. The truth of what they'd been created for twisting in his gut like a knife as he moved between the pods, his enhanced vision piercing the fogged glass to reveal the figures floating within, not copies of himself, but things that might have been human once. Their bodies twisted into grotesque parodies of life, some with too many limbs, others with faces stretched across entire torsos, all bearing the same look of frozen agony, the locket in his hand flaring suddenly as if in recognition, its light revealing a path through the nightmare gallery to a raised dais at the chamber. A center where a single pod stood apart from the others, this one made of smooth black material that drank in the light, its surface unmarked except for a handprint glowing the same blue as his locket, the compulsion to approach overwhelming, his feet moving of their own accord as the chamber seemed to hold its breath around him, the veins underfoot pulsing faster as he neared the central pod, the handprint beckoning like a lover's touch, when a voice he hadn't heard in countless cycles spoke from directly behind him. I'd hoped you'd be the one to find this place. The words sending electric shocks down his spine as he turned to face the woman who de-haunted his dreams, his mother, but not as he remembered. Her once white hair now streaked with black veins that matched those covering the chamber walls, her eyes glowing the same unnatural blue as the locket. Her body clad in form-fitting armor that seemed grown rather than manufactured, a smile both welcoming and terrifying in equal measure. Her hands raised in a gesture that might have been surrender or preparation for attack. Do you understand now why I gave you the key? She asked, her voice layered with something not entirely human. Her gaze flicking to the locket in his hand, its glow intensifying in response to her presence. The pieces of the puzzle slotting together with terrible clarity. She hadn't just encoded the locket with memories. She'd made it a control mechanism for whatever slept in that black pod. Her rebellion never about freedom, but about waking something far worse. The facility not a prison, but a nursery. The simulation's not torture but training. His stomach twisting as he understood the full scope of her betrayal. The locket suddenly heavy as a black hole in his palm, her smile widening at the dawning horror on his face. "They told me you were the clever one," she purred, stepping closer with movements too smooth to be entirely human, "my perfect little weapon." Bred to open the door when the time came, her hand reaching for the locket just as the chamber doors exploded inward. His brother and sister bursting through with weapons drawn and armor smoking, their faces masks of fury and betrayal as they took in the scene. His brother's voice raw with pain as he leveled his weapon at the woman they'd all fought to find. "Mother," he spat the word like a curse. "What have you done?" The question hanging in the air as the black pod behind them began to hum its surface. Cracking like an eggshell, the thing inside stirring at last, the locket in Ryu Min's hand burning white-hot as it made the choice for him. The cycle would end here one way or another. The locket's burning scream drowned out all other sound as Ryu Min's fingers fused with its molten metal. The pain beyond anything he'd endured across countless deaths. His vision widening out as the artifact's true purpose seared through his nervous system, not a key but a lock, not a gift but a shackle. Its glowing runes rewriting themselves across his flesh in jagged lines that pulsed with the same rhythm as the black pod's cracking surface. His mother's laughter ringing in his ears, even as his siblings opened fire. Their energy bolts carving through the air only to dissipate inches from her now glowing form. Her body shifting and elongating as the thing in the pod stirred its awakening sending shockwaves through the chamber that toppled the ancient pods like dominoes, their glass shattering to release the horrors within, the twisted figures uncurling with wet, popping sounds as their mismatched limbs found purchase on the shuddering floor. Their mouths opening in unison to release a sound that wasn't sound but pure psychic agony. Ryu Min's bones vibrating with the force of it as the locket's hold on him tightened. His body turning against his will to face the now fractured black pod, his arm raising as if pulled by invisible strings. The molten metal of the locket flowing up his wrist to form a blade of crackling blue energy that hummed with terrible purpose. His brother's shouts of warning drowned out by the voice, now booming through his skull, not his mother's, but something older. Hungrier, its words slithering through his mind like serpents made of smoke. "You were born for this moment, little key," it crooned, the black pod's crack spreading like spider webs as something vast. And dark began to emerge, to carve the door and set me free, the command settling over Ryu Min's body like a second skin even as his mind rebelled, his muscles straining against the compulsion as his siblings fought their way through the awakening horrors. Toward him their weapons flashing in the now strobing light. His sister's mask shattering to reveal tears streaking through the blood on her face as she screamed his name, his real name. The one buried beneath layers of conditioning. The sound of it like a lifeline thrown into a storm. The locket's hold faltering for just an instant, just long enough for Ryu Min to wrench control of the energy blade and turn it against his own chest. The tip hovering over his heart as he made the only choice left. If he was the key, he would break in the lock. His mother's scream of rage shaking the chamber as she realized his intent, her form elongating further as she launched herself toward him, her fingers now talons aimed at his throat. When a blast of white-hot energy cut her down mid-lep, her body crashing to the floor in a tangle of unnatural limbs. Ryu Min's head whipping toward the source to see a figure standing in the ruin. Doorway not a soldier, but a frail-looking old man in a tattered lab coat. His face lined with exhaustion, his hands steady around a weapon that looked cobbled together from scrap. His voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected strength. "I told them you'd fight it," he said. His eyes meeting Ryu Min's with something like pride, "just like your father did." The revelation hitting like a hammer blow as the old man raised his weapon again. This time, aiming not at Ryu Min's mother, but at the black pod itself. The shot striking true as the emerging horror let out a shriek that shattered the remaining pods completely. The chamber descending into pandemonium as hundreds of twisted creatures surged forward, their movements no longer random, but directed. Coordinated, flowing around Ryu Min and his siblings like water around stones as they made straight for the old scientist. His weapon firing again and again as he backpedaled toward the door, his voice rising above the din, the failsafe. He shouted, his eyes locking with Ryu Min's one last time, The locket is the failsafe. The words barely registered as the horde overwhelmed him, his body disappearing beneath a tide of clawing limbs. His final act buying them the seconds they needed, Ryu Min's brother grabbing his arm with bruising force. "We have to go now," he roared, his other hand, dragging their sister along as the chamber. Ceiling began to collapse, the thing in the black pod, finally free of its confines. Its form shifting too rapidly to comprehend, a whirlwind of teeth and eyes and grasping tendrils that made the mind recoil. Ryu Min's body moving on autopilot, as he followed his siblings through the crumbling ruins of the nightmare nursery. The locket's blade still humming in his grip. Its purpose clear now, not to open the door but to seal it, the old man's words slotting into place with terrible clarity. The three of them sprinting through corridors that twisted and changed behind them, the very facility reshaping itself to aid the thing's pursuit. Their mother's laughter echoing from the walls as her broken body somehow kept pace. Her form flickering in and out of existence like a bad signal, her voice layered with the things as she taunted them. "You can't outrun what's inside you," she sang, her words punctuated by the screams of fleeing staff, as the facility's automated defenses turned on its inhabitants. The emergency lights casting everything in pulsing red that made the blood on the walls look black. Ryu Min's sister suddenly skidding to a halt before a sealed bulkhead, her hands flying over the control panel with desperate speed. "This leads to the core," she panted. The door hissing open to reveal a narrow maintenance shaft. "If we can overload the reactors," her words cut off as their mother materialized before them. Her body now more the things than human, her smile stretching impossibly wide as she reached for them. Ryu Min moving without thought as he brought the locket's blade down in a shining arc, the energy weapon carving through her torso with a sound like screaming metal. Her shocked expression the last human thing about her as she split in two, both halves writhing on the floor as black smoke poured from the wounds. The thing's howl of rage shaking the walls as it rounded the distant corner. Its form now more concrete, a towering mass of fused bodies, all screaming in unison, their outstretched hands grasping hungrily, Ryu Min shoving his siblings through the door before turning to face the nightmare. The locket's blade flaring brighter as he made his choice, the words leaving his lips with finality. "Seal it behind me." He ordered his brother's protests, fading as the door slammed shut. The last thing he saw before turning to face the abomination being his sister. As tear-streaked face, mouthing the same words she had in the arena. "Find me in the next cycle," the promise ringing in his ears as the locket's energy surged to blinding levels, its true purpose unlocked at last, the failsafe activating with a sound like the world ending. The locket's detonation shattered reality itself, supernova of blue-white energy erupting from Ryu Min's chest as he plunged the blade into his own heart, the shockwave vaporizing the approaching horror instantly, its countless screaming mouths dissolving into ash before they could touch him. The facility walls peeling back like burning paper to reveal the infinite black void beneath what they all thought was real, his body disintegrating molecule by molecule, even as his consciousness expanded beyond physical limits. The pain beyond comprehension, yet somehow secondary to the clarity that came with it. This was on death but transcendence. The locket's true purpose, not destruction, but revelation. The energy wave spreading outward in an unending tide that dissolved every lie. Every simulation, every carefully constructed layer of the prison they'd called existence. His awareness expanding to encompass the full horrific truths of facility. The experiments, the cycles upon cycles of suffering, all existed within something far vaster and more ancient. A cosmic engine built to contain the thing he'd just destroyed. Its tendrils threaded through countless realities. Like a cancer, his mother not its victim, but its high priestess, her rebellion. A carefully orchestrated ritual to weaken the seals, binding at the locket, a fragment of the original lock crafted by forces beyond human understanding. His entire life engineered to this single moment, where he would either break the cycle or become the key that ended all things. The realization flooding him with equal parts terror and awe as his dissolving form hurtled through the unraveling layers of false reality, each one peeling away to reveal deeper truths beneath. The facility was gone now, replaced by an endless expanse of floating ruins. Drifting through the void, each fragment containing echoes of other lives, other cycles, other versions of himself who had failed this test. Their skeletal remains still clutching their own broken lockets, empty eye sockets accusing him even in death, when suddenly, A hand grasped his disintegrating wrist with impossible solidity. His vision clearing to reveal his sister floating beside him, her form similarly half-dissolved into energy. Her face alight with something like triumph as she pulled him toward a shimmering portal that had been there a moment before. Her voice cutting through the void silence with crystalline clarity. "It's not over yet," she declared. Her grip unbreakable, even as the last of their physical forms faded. "The lock needs a guardian, and it chose you." The words resonating through his being as they passed through the portal's event horizon. The transition instantaneous, one moment floating in the void. The next standing whole and solid in a place that defied all logic, a circular platform of black stone floating in an endless sky of swirling galaxies. At its center, a massive throne carved from the same material as the locket. Its surface etched with runes that told the story of civilizations long dead, the air humming with latent power that made his teeth ache. His sister's hand still gripping his as she led him toward the throne, her form. "This is the heart of it all," she explained. Her voice layered with echoes of the countless versions of herself who had stood here before. The control point for every reality that thing was infecting. Her free hand gesturing to the swirling sky where images of countless worlds now flickered, some recognizable as variations of the facility, others utterly alien, all connected by shimmering threads of blue light that converged on the throne. The weight of what she was suggesting settling over him like a physical force. His knees buckling as the full implications hit. They hadn't just destroyed a monster. They'd inherited its prison, the throne's power humming in his bones as if recognizing its new master. His sister's grip tightening as she pulled him upright, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can fix what she broke," she insisted, nodding toward the throne. But only together, the unspoken question hanging between them, was he ready to become something more than human? To sacrifice whatever remained of his individuality, to stand eternal guard. Against the darkness, the choice crystallizing as the first tendrils of the throne's power began winding around his legs. Their touch cold and electric, the memories of everyone he'd ever lost flashing through his mind, his brother's final stand, the old scientists, sacrifice even his mother before the thing had twisted, their faces merging into a single imperative. That ground out all doubt. His hand tightening around his sister's as he took the first deliberate step toward the throne. The runes flaring to life at his approach. Their light painting the platform in shifting patterns that told the oldest story of all light. Against dark order, against chaos, the eternal balance that must be maintained. The throne's power surging up to meet him as he crossed the final threshold, his body dissolving into pure energy as he merged with the ancient mechanism. His consciousness expanding to encompass the entire network of realities. The pain beyond anything a mortal mind could comprehend, yet somehow worth it as he felt his sister's presence merging with his own. Their combined strength reinforcing the frayed barriers between worlds, sealing the cracks the thing had exploited. The last remnants of its influence screaming as they were purged from 1,000 infected timelines. The work of lifetimes compressed into a single timeless moment. When suddenly a resistance, a familiar presence pushing back from within the network itself. His mother's laughter echoing through the cosmic pathways as her essence revealed itself woven deep into the system's code. Her voice dripping with malicious triumph. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" she taunted, her influence surging like a virus through the newly repaired conduits. "I am the system now," her declaration accompanied by a wave of corrupting energy that threatened to unravel everything. Ryu Min and his sister straining to contain the outbreak, even as it spread faster than they could counter. The throne itself shaking under the assault. When salvation came from the unlikeliest source, a burst of pure white energy carving through the corruption like a scalpel. Its touch burning away the infection with surgical precision. The source revealing itself as the old scientist's ghostly form standing beside the throne, his hands moving with expert precision over controls only he could see. His voice calm despite the cosmic storm raging around them. "I told you I built a back door," he reminded Ryu Min, his grin visible even through the spectral haze. "Now let's finish what your father started." The words unlocking a final memory buried deepest of all, not just a scientist, but the throne's previous guardian. His father in every way that mattered, his sacrifice the only reason the lock had held as long as it had. The revelation fueling Ryu Min's resolve as he redirected the throne's full power against his mother's corruption. his sister amplifying his efforts as the old man guided their strikes. The three of them working in perfect harmony as they systematically purged her influence from every infected world, her screams growing fainter with each passing moment until finally, blessedly, there was silence, the network stabilizing as the last traces of her presence were sealed away in a prison of their own making, the exhaustion. Overwhelming as Ryu Min's consciousness began to contract back to the throne room, his form solidifying once more as the immediate threat passed. The old man's ghost fading with a satisfied smile, his final words a whisper on the cosmic wind. "You'll do better than I did," the vote of confidence undercut by his sister's sudden gasp as she pointed to the edge of the platform where a single crack had formed in the black stone. Thin tendrils of familiar black smoke curling upward from its depths, her voice barely audible over the throne's suddenly panicked alarms. "It's not over," she breathed, her hand finding Ryu Min's once more as they turned to face the new threat together, the cycle beginning anew. The crack in the black stone spread like lightning across glass, the thin tendrils of smoke coalescing into grasping fingers that clawed at the throne room's edges, platform shuddering beneath Ryu Min. His feet, as the thing they just destroyed, began reconstituting itself from the remnants of his mother's corruption. Its whispers slithering through the cracks in reality like poison, the voice no longer pretending to be human as it taunted them. "You cannot kill what was never alive," it hissed, the words vibrating through Ryu Min's bones with terrifying intimacy. "I am the spaces between thoughts, the silence beneath screams, the void that waits when all light fades." Each declaration punctuated by another fracture spreading across the platform, the swirling galaxy above them darkening as entire star systems winked out of existence, consumed by the growing darkness. His sister's grip on his hand tightening to the point of pain as she channeled the throne's power into a desperate containment field, the blue energy flaring bright against the advancing blackness, but already faltering under the onslaught. Her voice strained as she shouted over the cacophony of collapsing realities. "It's using our connection against us." The realization hitting Ryu Min like a physical blotha thing wasn't just attacking from outside. It was emerging from within, their shared bloodline, the perfect conduit for its return. The throne's alarms reaching a fever pitch as its diagnostics confirmed their worst fears. The system's voice calm even in annihilation, corruption at 87% and rising, it reported. As if they couldn't see the darkness swallowing the platform whole, recommend immediate severance protocol. The words triggering a flood of memories, not their own visions of previous guardians facing this same choice.
Oh.
Their faces grim as they performed the unthinkable to preserve the balance. Ryu Min's free hand rising instinctively to the energy blade still humming at his chest, its edge.
Oh.
Now flickering between blue and an ominous black-red. The weight of what needed to be done settling over him like a shroud, his sister's eyes meeting his with sudden understanding, her grip on his hand shifting from desperate to deliberate. As she pulled him closer, her free hand rising to mirror his on the blade's hilt, their foreheads touching as the darkness closed in around them. The thing's laughter now coming from all directions at once, its triumph palpable as it sensed their resignation. Finally it purred, its voice the sound of bones breaking in unison. The children embraced their birthright, the taunt fading as Ryu Min and his sister pushed the energy blade through both their chests simultaneously. The pain beyond anything they'd ever experienced, white-hot and infinite as the blade's true function activated. It's not a weapon, but a scalpel, its edge severing not flesh, but the very bonds of their shared bloodline. The throne's power surging through the wound in a cataclysmic purge that burned away every trace of the thing's corruption. Its screams of rage shaking the foundations of reality as its connection was violently severed. The platform stabilizing as the cracks began sealing themselves. The darkness receding like a tide under the relentless onslaught of blue-white energy. Had their sacrifice working exactly as intended, it didn't. The throne's diagnostics flickering erratically as an unexpected variable entered the equation, Ryu Min's vision blurring as he saw it. A third figure standing just beyond the light's edge, his brother's familiar form limned in golden energy. His armor shattered, but his stance unbroken as he stepped between them and the retreating darkness, his voice cutting through the chaos with impossible clarity. "Did you really think I'd let you have all the fun?" The joke landing even in the face of annihilation. As he placed his hands on their shoulders, his unique energy signature, neither throne-given nor corruption-born, but something entirely his own, flaring bright as it stabilized the severance. Protocol, the three of them now bound, not by blood, but by choice, the throne's alarms, shifting tone as it registered the new connection parameters. Corruption contained, it announced. The darkness beyond the platform recoiling as if burned. New network forming. The words barely processed as Ryu Min felt the change happening where, before there had been 2 points of light resisting the dark. Now there were 3, their energies intertwining in a pattern the thing couldn't penetrate. Its frustrated screams fading as the last of the cracks sealed shut, the platform solidifying beneath them once more. The galaxy above slowly reigniting star by star. The immediate threat passed, but the cost all too clear. The energy blades still protruded from their chests. Its work incomplete. The severance of their bloodline a permanent condition. Ryu Min's vision swimming as he took in his siblings' ashen faces. Their shared exhaustion mirroring his own, the throne's voice softer now, almost apologetic. Stabilization requires anchor points, it explained. The platform's surface shifting to reveal 3 distinct stations arranged around the central throne, each humming with a different color energy: blue for Ryu Min, silver for his sister, gold for his brother, 1 for each, or none at all. The choice presented without judgment, but with absolute finality. His brother's grin bleeding at the edges as he locked eyes with Ryu Min. Guess this makes us the new cosmic balance, he joked. His bravado undercut by the way his hands trembled where they still gripped their shoulders. His sister's quiet sob the only sound as the full weight of their decision settled over them. To walk away now would mean the thing's eventual return. But to stay meant becoming something more and less than human. Eternal guardians bound to a throne at the center of all things. The silence stretching as they each searched the other's faces for any sign of hesitation. Finding only the same resigned determination mirrored threefold. Their hands joining over the hilt of the energy blade as they made their choice together. The throne's power surging up to meet them as they stepped toward their designated stations. The transition both instantaneous and eternal, their human forms dissolving into pure energy as they merged with the system, their consciousnesses expanding to encompass the entire network of realities. The pain of transformation fading as their new purpose took hold, not just to guard against the darkness, but to nurture the light the last. Remnants of their individuality intertwining as they settled into their eternal vigil. The platform empty now, except for the throne and 3 faint afterimages that shimmered in the starlight. Their legacy written in the constellations above, their story only just beginning. Eternity unfolded in the space between heartbeats as Ryu Min's consciousness expanded across the repaired network of realities, his awareness fractaling outward to encompass infinite worlds simultaneously. Each thread of his being woven tight with his siblings to form an unbreakable lattice of blue, gold, and silver energy that pulsed like a living thing through the cosmic pathways. The throne room now both nowhere and everywhere at once, its black stone platform. Visible as a faint shimmer at the center of all things when viewed from the right angle, their 3 stations. Humming with quiet power as they maintained the delicate balance between creation and entropy. The work of guardianship settling into a rhythm that defied mortal comprehension. One moment adjusting the flow of time in a dying universe to allow its inhabitants a few precious extra moments of life. The next, gently steering an asteroid away from a fledgling civilization on the cusp of discovering fire. Their intervention subtle but constant. The weight of responsibility like a second skin after what might have been centuries or seconds. Time meant little in the throne room. When the first anomaly appeared, a single thread in the cosmic web vibrating out of sync. Its frequency jarringly familiar, Ryu Min's focus snapping to a reality that shouldn't exist. A perfect replica of the facility where their nightmare had begun. Its sterile halls populated by fresh batches of subjects bearing their faces, the simulations running exactly as they had before. The discovery sending shockwaves through their shared consciousness. His sister's voice the first to break the stunned silence. She built redundancies. The words laced with horrified awe as they traced the anomaly's source to a backup system. Their mother had hidden deep in the network's blind spots its existence masked, until the moment it activated his brother's energy, flaring gold with barely restrained fury as he analyzed the implications. It's not just one facility, it's hundreds, maybe thousands. It's all set to wake up if the main system ever went dark. The revelation like a knife to the gut, their victory suddenly hollow. The thing's laughter echoing through the cosmic pathways, despite being securely locked away. Its voice dripping with malicious glee. Did you think it would be that easy? The taunt slithering through cracks they hadn't known existed. Ryu Min's hands? Did he still have hands? Tightening around the threads of reality as he made the only choice left, they would have to enter the simulation themselves. Not as players this time, but as architects. Their godlike powers severely limited by the backup system's protocols, but still greater than anything their mother had accounted for. The three of them weaving avatars from stray energy and lost memories, and their forms condensing into something almost physical as they plunged into the false reality. The transition jarringly intimate after so long as cosmic beings. The smell of antiseptic and ozone assaulting Ryu Min's newly reconstructed nose as he materialized in a familiar white hallway. His siblings appearing beside him in bodies that felt both alien and achingly familiar, their gazes locking in silent agreement before they moved as one, their enhanced forms cutting through the facility's defenses like paper, the alarms blaring as they made straight for the core. Their mother's backup presence awakening in the system with a surge of static, her face flickering across every screen they passed, her expression shifting from shock to fury to something almost like pride as she recognized what had come for her. "My children," she crooned, her voice warping with distortion. "You've grown so powerful." The compliment undercut by the sudden activation of every remaining subject in the facility, their blank-eyed forms converging from all directions. Their movements too coordinated, too precise, his sister's silver energy flaring as she erected a barrier to hold them back, her voice tight with strain. "Go," she urged. "We'll hold them off. You have to reach the core." The order unnecessary as Ryu Min was already moving, his brother falling into step beside him as they carved through the sea of subjects, their every step bringing them closer to the heart of the nightmare. The facility shaking around them as their sister's power clashed with their mother's the walls. Bleeding static where the two energies met. The corridor ahead terminating in a massive door emblazoned with the same symbol that had been on the locket. 8. Its surface humming with malignant energy, Ryu Min's borrowed heart pounding as he placed one hand against the cold metal, the other still gripping the energy blade he'd manifested. His brother's breath warm on his neck as they prepared to face what waited within, together. The question barely audible over the chaos. Ryu Min's answering nod, all the confirmation needed as the door exploded inward under their combined strength. The chamber beyond revealing their mother's true backup form, not a woman but a massive core of pulsating flesh and machine. Her face stretched across its surface like a grotesque mural, her lips parting in a smile that showed too many teeth. "Welcome home," she purred, the core's tendrils already lashing toward them with lethal speed. The final battle beginning not with a shout but with silence, the three siblings moving as one perfect unit against the woman who had made and broken them. The outcome uncertain, but the choice already made. They would fight this war across every reality as many times as it took, because that's what Guardians did. The core chamber erupted in a storm of conflicting energies as Ryu Min's blade met his mother's lashing tendrils. The impact sending shockwaves through the simulated facility that cracked walls and shattered observation windows. His brother's golden energy flaring like a miniature sun as he flanked left, his fists carving through the biomechanical horrors their mother summoned from the floor's fleshy substrate. The air thick with the scent of burning ozone and something coppery that might have been blood in a real world. Their sister-S silver barriers flickering at the chamber entrance as she held back the tide of brainwashed subjects, her voice cutting through the chaos with laser focus. The core has a pattern it pulses every 7 seconds. The observation coming just as Ryu Min noticed the subtle rhythm in their mother's attacks. The way her defenses momentarily weakened each time the central mass contracted. The revelation sparking a coordinated assault that saw all three siblings striking in perfect unison during that fractional vulnerability. Their combined energies carving deep gouges in the pulsating flesh their mother. Screams shifting from fury to something almost like pain as black ichor sprayed across the sterile white walls the backup system's integrity. Beginning to falter as damage accumulated, error messages flickering across every visible screen in jagged red text. when suddenly the entire facility shuddered violently. The lights cutting out for 3 terrifying seconds before emergency illumination bathed everything in bloody crimson. Their mother's laughter echoing from the walls with renewed vigor. "Did you forget where you are?" she taunted the core's wounds already knitting shut. As the simulation reset itself to an earlier save point, the siblings' hard-won progress erased in an instant. Ryu Min's stomach dropping as he realized the horrifying truth they weren't fighting in a real facility, but a perfect digital replica, one that could undo any damage with a thought, their mother's voice dripping with smug superiority. "This is my world, children, and here I am God." The declaration punctuated by the chamber walls dissolving into pure data streams that reconfigured into an endless maze of shifting corridors. The siblings suddenly separated by kilometers of artificially generated space. Ryu Min's calms filled with static as he tried to reach his brother and sister, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by the simulation's constantly changing rules. The energy blade in his hand flickering as its connection to the throne room weakened. The first true flicker of fear igniting in his chest as he understood their fatal miscalculation. They brought celestial weapons to a digital war, and their mother had just changed the game, the realization crystallizing. The moment a familiar figure materialized from the swirling data streams before him, not his mother this time, but himself, an exact replica right down to the scars on his knuckles. The copy's smile all wrong as it raised a perfect duplicate of his energy blade. "Let's see how you fare against your own moves," it taunted in his voice, the attack coming faster than Ryu Min could react. His own techniques used against him with brutal precision, the blade carving a burning line across his chest that sent him stumbling back. The pain terrifyingly real, despite the simulated environment. His mind racing for a solution as his doppelganger advanced with murderous intent. When salvation came from an unexpected source, his sister's voice whispering through the static in his comms. Not words, but code. A string of numbers that made his vision swim as they unlocked something buried deep in his avatar's programming. The realization hitting like lightning: they weren't just visitors in this simulation. They were programs themselves now, and all programs had back doors. His hand moving of its own accord as he input the command sequence, his body dissolving into pure data, just as the doppelganger's blade would have taken his head. His consciousness streaming through the facility's wiring at light speed, the world reassembling around him in the heart of the core chamber where his sister and brother stood back to back, their avatars glitching badly as they fought off endless waves of replicated enemies, their eyes widening in relief as Ryu Min materialized beside them. The 3 joining hands without hesitation as they executed the final command sequence together, their voices merging into a single declaration that shook the simulation to its foundations. "Administrator, override. Sigma Neen 00. The words sending cracks racing through the digital world as their mother's screams reached a fever pitch. The core surface splitting open to reveal the fragile quantum processor at its center. Their opening, arriving at last, Ryu Min's blade plunging deep into the glowing heart of the machine. His siblings' energies amplifying the strike until the entire simulation began collapsing. Inward, their mother's form flickering between rage and something almost like pride as her creation disintegrated around them. "Always were my masterpiece," she whispered, one hand brushing Ryu Min's cheek even as she faded into nothingness, the facility dissolving into screaming static that gave way to blinding white. The 3 siblings clinging to each other as the simulation ended their consciousnesses, hurled back into the throne room with enough force to crack the black stone beneath them, their cosmic forms still thrumming with residual energy from the battle, the network around them stabilizing as the last of the backup facilities winked out of existence. Their mother's presence purged completely this time. The thing's anguished howl echoing through the void as its final foothold was destroyed. The siblings' exhaustion palpable as they surveyed their handiwork, entire realities saved from becoming feeding grounds. Countless lives spared, untold suffering, the cost written in the new scars that marred their avatars even here in the throne room, his brother breaking the silence with a tired chuckle. "So," he mused, stretching his golden energy like sore muscles, "we doing this again next millennium?" The gallows humor earning a punch from their sister, even as she smiled. Ryu Min's gaze turning outward to the infinite expanse. They guarded the work never truly over, but the balance. Secured for now, his hand resting on the energy blade at his side, as he answered with quiet certainty. Whenever they need us, the promise hanging in the air between them. As the throne room's lights dimmed to standby mode, the Guardians settling into their eternal vigil once more, the cycle continuing, the end becoming the beginning.